All right, we're going to get started here. So if I can ask all of the LTAC members to share their screen, those who are connected virtually, so we can go through with um, and then we can call our LTAC meeting here to order. You guys can hear me online, right? Getting less noise from the room than I
Yes.
expected, but I know these microphones are always a little weird. Um, all right, Annalyn, if you could give us a roll call, that would be great.
Peter Arth,
Present.
Samuel Choi,
Here.
Augustine Pieri,
Present.
Sushmitha Reddy,
Here.
Judy Morgan, Saguna Pillay,
Here.
Teresa Johnson. No. James Forrest,
Present.
Kelvin Yoon,
Here.
Rachel Cahill,
Present.
Melissa Hall,
Here.
Renita Prasad, John Franco Saraceno,
Here.
Cheryl Prowell, I see her present.
Sorry, it took a
Um,
second to get up audio. I'm here.
That's okay. Thank you. Mui Koltanov. Okay. And I think that's it for roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalyn. With that, we're going to move to agenda item number 2, which is our state regulatory agency updates. Since Melissa's here, I'm going to call on her first. If she's not ready, I can give a little bit of an update. And then John Franco, if you have any updates. And then I know Cheryl, who's the alternate for Erica, mentioned that you guys don't have anything. But if you had anything since that last email, let me know. We can give you your update here. Perfect. Then I'll give a brief little update. So there's a DELAPO report. It's posted on our website on the LTAC membership page. I sent it to all the members. If you need a copy, feel free to email me. But one of the major items that I'll bring to everyone's attention is I am going to be no longer the DELAPO for at least the foreseeable future. I'm being moved to some other special projects that ELAP has. They're exciting to see, including potentially updating our GIS map to make it a little bit more feature rich, have potentially searchable by method and by analyte and by matrix, moving over to the newer GIS system. So that's hopefully something that you all will be able to use soon. And then we have an informal project with IIT to expand a little bit of ELAP's database functionality. So it's not something that you may see at all, but it will be very helpful in terms of the smooth operation of ELAP. So with that, the DELAPO is being assigned to Jen McLaren, who I think everyone here knows and everyone online probably knows as well. She's our supervisor for our progress and performance unit. She was the former accreditation officer, so she's emailed a lot of the laboratories across the state. And if you haven't talked to her, I'm sure you will soon. Um, And so you guys are going to be left in great hands. But you're more than welcome to email me and pester me as well. I'll still be around, and I'll probably still have topics here at ELTAC, but I won't be the designated ELAP officer anymore. So that's the major item. There's a bunch of information in the DELAPO report. I'm happy to expand on anything if anyone has any specific questions about it. But if not, then I'll pass it over to Melissa for update from the Division of Drinking Water.
Thank you. I'll see if I can bring up some slides. Otherwise, I can just talk through it because it's relatively short. The board adopted the priorities resolution in March for regulatory priorities for the calendar year 2026. And I was just going to go through. And I'm obviously not used to using the little pad on the laptop. Okay. So we had our priorities resolution adopted in March. Some of the key points or activities for this year that impact laboratories potentially are we've been conducting our organic chemical laboratory surveys with a view toward adjusting the DLRs. You should have seen a notice recently for proposed regulation text to update our electronic reporting regulations. That's planned for board adoption in June. I keep hearing soon for issuing our manganese notification and response level revisions, which would be followed by a request for a manganese public health goal. Once manganese is out on those two fronts, you should expect to see proposal for cyanotoxins notification and response levels. Somewhere in that mix, there will also be the metal DLRs rulemaking notice. That's slightly delayed as we adapt to another ongoing rulemaking because we've got several groups pushing out regulations this summer. But that one we're expecting to notice in June or July still. There is a planned manganese monitoring order scheduled for later this year. Following the new statute, or not new anymore, a few years old statutory process for notification response levels, we've got a planned notification and response level informational item on the proposed cyanotoxins notification response levels, after which we could proceed with issuance. There's a plan to adopt the lead and copper rule federal updates in late August. Those, there was an announcement, at least to the drinking water announcements listserv just yesterday, I think, or the day before, on a proposal and an opportunity for a workshop. This is the rule that we're working around a little bit on the metal DLRs because the plan is to replace chapter 17.5 with lead and copper rule with 17.6, which means we need to kind of adjust our plans for where we're going to house the lead and copper DLRs. With the lab surveys, we'll continue with the rest of the organic suite, including the disinfection byproducts over the summer. For this fall and winter, we'd be looking at board adoption of the laboratory accreditation, the elective T&I dual certificate regulations, or at least the fee schedule portion of it, publishing the PFAS stage 1 rulemaking notice, which we just got the pre-reg proposed regulation text from EPA yesterday. So we are reviewing that to see how that impacts what we're planning to do. And again, we'll continue with the lab surveys, and I think radioactivity is the last one. And the goal is to get through all of the lab surveys for DLRs by the end of this year so we can really know where we're at and proceed with rulemakings off of those. For MCLs, we are picking up with the styrene MCL revision and planning to hold a preliminary cost workshop toward the end of this year, followed by publication of the rulemaking notice. Somewhere toward the end of the year, early next year, we'd be looking at hopefully getting a monitoring order out for NDMA or other disinfection byproducts. And then a scoping kind of question for laboratories for ELTAC, if there's time to discuss. Because we've got multiple people working on the regulations, or a number of topics on sampling have come up recently. And some things that we're looking at considering for future year efforts would potentially be an effort to focus on sampling kind of cradle to grave, including specifying minimum chain of custody requirements, consolidating the DLRs and analytical methods listings from 3 separate chapters into one chapter, probably chapter 15, and potentially standardizing the reporting timelines following sample collection to get the data into the database. So to the extent that any members or laboratories have interest in that or thoughts on that or resources to share, we'd be interested. And I think there's Yes, I think that's it.
I have a question. Thanks, Melissa, for the update. A couple questions from my end. What do you think is going to happen with the changes to the PFAS, the federal primary drinking water standards that they said yesterday? I don't know, yesterday, day before. Um, are you guys planning on adopting like PFNA and HFPODA, or what's the thought there?
We're trying to figure out how to do that. Typically don't like to lean on draft things in general.
Mhm.
This isn't as much draft science as draft policy and regulations, so we're thinking about that. There's also an awareness that if we do adopt the rest of the current federal regulations in spite of the proposed deletions, that we potentially are obligating a WEHA to spend resources developing public health goals for PFAS contaminants that are not as significant public health wise here in California. So we're trying to navigate those.
That makes sense. And the other thing is for the chain of custody thing, I agree. That was one of the things I was going to bring up as other topics, that it would be great to standardize that. I mean, the laws probably agree that they're all over the place, right? We have our chain of custody, we have our lab, our our client chain of custodies, and they don't match, and there's confusion, and they're difficult. So I think making an effort to standardize that would be at least from my perspective. I don't know about the other labs, but
And digitizing that would be even greater.
yeah, yeah.
I had a question on your electronic reporting regs. Is that regarding CLIP and
Yes,
okay.
yes. And I think we have a speaker on a future database for water tap coming up next in the agenda.
So the bigger concern out of that was a micro reporting into CLIP within, was it 60 days or 30 days from when it was adopted? Is that still the timeline that you're going to hold the labs to?
I think the group that is running that reg package, I think they received a few comment letters and are going through those comments and considering whether they might make some adjustments to the language.
Okay.
I don't know what their schedule is for sharing potentially a revised draft yet.
Yeah,
But I think they're still aiming for June for board adoption.
right. The concern was the timeline may be a little ambitious for labs, especially for the electronic reporting of microdata.
I'll relay that back to them.
Yeah, and I've been helping them too. From what I hear, it's still June is the target, and they have taken a lot of the comments from the laboratory community and adjusted things accordingly. So that was the last draft that I saw, was they understood your concern, and have revised the reg package to be more specific to what they're trying to do. Anyone from online? I'm not seeing any hands or anything, so I'm gonna assume nothing. Correct. All right. Well then, John Franco or Carol, if you had anything, now would be the time. But if not, then we'll move on to the next agenda topic. Cheryl?
There's nothing for the water board.
Nothing from DWR either.
Okay, great. Well then, with that, we're going to move on to the next agenda topic. I'll pause and we'll circle back if we get any comments. If you're looking to enter comments, you email elapca_comments at waterboards.ca.gov. We'll happy to let you into the Zoom meeting. We'll give you a Zoom link, or you can send us a comment and we'll have it read out loud for the committee members to vote on. We are aware that the delay between the room here and the webcast is like a minute and 30 seconds. So we'll ask for comments and then we'll give you some time to circle back around if we get any there. So we may jump back to prior agenda items just based on what we get for the comments. But for that, I'd love to be able to introduce Matthew Zika Flores, who's going to talk a little bit about water tap and an ask from the Division of Drinking Water.
Good morning, everyone. I have a couple screens here, so I may not look at you all the time, but let me get my screen shared here. Okay. Thank you for making a little time for me to present today. My name is Matthew Zarzica Flores. I work in the Division of Drinking Water at the Water Boards. My normal day job is to work on complaints related to and enforcement of the Water Shutoff Protection Act, ensuring that water systems are following the act when they decide to use shutoff as a mechanism against delinquent customers. But another hat I wear is at DDW is as a member of the Water Tap Work Group. So what is Water Tap? For those unaware, which may be most of you, Water Tap, or the Water Technical Access Program, is an ongoing DDW data systems project. It will ultimately be a one-stop data system that combines many separate systems into one to streamline the information that internal DDW staff use, as well as external stakeholders. If you use, collect, research, monitor, or report drinking water data in some capacity, you'll likely be using Water Tap in the future.
Hey, Matthew.
Yes,
Are
please.
you sharing a screen? Because we
Oh.
don't see it here.
Thank you. I have one more button to click here.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Okay. All you missed was an intro slide and this explainer on Water Tap. Thank you for stopping me there. Okay, on to the next slide. The Water Tap Work Group is in the process of forming its own advisory group. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Water Tap will not only impact DDW staff, but external stakeholders as well. And so, in the process of developing the system, which we are doing right now, we want to make sure that we are including collaborative voices from various entities to ensure we are developing a system that can work for and benefit all of its users. So who are we looking for to join this group? In no particular order, Native tribe representatives, community water system representatives, non-community water system reps, NGOs, contract operators, academics and research experts, and last but not least, drinking water accredited lab representatives. Why am I here today? Well, we sent out a Gov delivery notice to a large list of folks earlier this month and opened the application for prospective advisory group members. The application is still open and we're still receiving applications until May 29th, but we still don't have a single applicant from a drinking water lab. So I'm here to try and do one of two things. One, I'm hoping that you all can, one, nominate a drinking water accredited lab representative to be considered for membership into our Water Tap Advisory Group, and two, encourage any other lab representative to consider applying. In speaking with Christopher before this meeting, it sounds like it might be beneficial to get the perspective of both commercial labs as well as municipal labs, but I'll leave that up to you and your expertise. Regardless of your nomination or any other applications we receive, they will all have to go through our division director for consideration and approval. But your nominee or nomination would go a long way in helping him make that decision. Obviously, these links won't help you at this moment, but I'm happy to share these slides with the group later on or put these links in the chat. But for more information on the Water Tap program, you can see the webpage at the top link. To read the advisory group charter, you can see the second link. For questions, frequently asked questions about the advisory group, that third link, and then a specific link to the actual advisory group application for anyone who's interested in applying to fill out. As a reminder, that closes May 29th. Any questions about Water Tap can go directly to the DDW outreach inbox listed there, or to me, but you're better off going to the outreach inbox. You'll probably get a response from me regardless, but that one's probably easier to remember and spell out. That's my last slide. Happy to take any questions, thoughts. If you don't have anyone, I was kind of originally asked to solicit potential advisory group members. If you have any off the top of your mind, I'm happy to take those down. If you need time to think about it, happy to receive emails or those suggestions later on after you've had time to think about it or deliberate. But anyway, that's my last slide.
I'll volunteer. Not to be reluctant, but I will have somebody from our lab volunteer, I guess. We'll do that. But yeah, we'd be happy to help with something like this.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Same goes for Babcock. We will work on getting the application. And also, I just want to give a little bit of feedback. I just searched my email as far as the where the solicitation came out, and it didn't seem to have gone through to everyone. So just for a suggestion for the future.
Thank you. Yeah, we did a Gov delivery notice, and actually, I guess that'd be a good point here to see who received it. We did the best as we could based on kind of the different boxes and groups and members that people sign up for to send that out to. But I guess it is possible people have fallen through. So sorry if you missed that. Hopefully this is a way to catch more of you in that. So thank you.
Matthew, it may serve the intent if that request is resent, maybe in alternative channels, because this is the first I've heard. Both James and we kind of serve on the AWWA, Water Quality Analysis Committee, and this is the first we've heard. Nobody's even mentioned this. So I suspect that nobody knows about this, and that explains the 0 applications.
Sure.
Yeah, same here. We didn't receive it either.
Okay. Interesting. I'll look into the process there and make sure that we try and figure out a way to make sure groups like yours are incorporated later and why they weren't in the last batch. But anyway, I'll just say that WaterTap has been a long time coming and has been worked on a lot at the water boards and DDW, internal staff and that sort of stuff. We've only recently started doing sort of public facing information, and so getting out to labs and the general public is somewhat relatively new. So it's not surprising that you haven't heard of WaterTap at all, but you will going forward, and you'll see more of us through different notices and outreach attempts. So
I did receive the email from WaterTap, but we were still considered. Nothing was decided, but it's good to hear from you. I have a couple of people that they would be interested.
Sorry, I'm struggling to your mic was starting to cut out. I'm not sure if that's for everyone else or just me, but I wasn't able to make out any questions there.
Yeah, that is for everyone else too. It didn't really come through clear here, but I'll reach out to you and let's get this announcement sent through ELAPS, Lyris, as well. Okay. I thought it was, but it's likely that it wasn't. Like you said, you have a lot more lists of subscriptions that you send out, but we can send one out through ELAPS listserv as well.
Cool.
Make sure we get more applications available.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll touch base on that. All righty. Well, I won't take up any more of your time if no other questions or comments. Thanks again for your time.
I was on mute. I'm going to redirect here and as I feel like is my role here as the DELAPO, your ask was potentially getting a nomination. Is that something that the committee wants to nominate a specific person, or do you want to more leave it open for applicants to apply? And I'll push that back to the committee members. If you want to nominate a specific person to be the ELTAC representative, or if you want to just leave it open to any laboratories that want to apply.
So Matthew, you need like people in the committee, right? You're looking for like not one person, you're looking for people.
Well, understanding, so we'll have a very specific group of advisory group members. Right now we're estimating based on the different groups we're trying to solicit 22 25 members, and given the breakdown of how many different entities and sort of the impact WaterTap will have, we are specifically targeting at least one lab representative, probably not more than two. But we'd love to have more than, let's say, one or two applicants to kind of consider and decide whether maybe it is worthwhile having maybe a more diverse lab representative pool if that makes more sense for the group. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could do it this way. That works for me if that's good for the. Yeah.
So the comments here are they're looking for drinking water, and so the two labs that are applying are drinking water laboratories. We want to make sure that folks online can hear us too.
But both are commercial, so if you want a public lab.
So then I'll reach out to you, Matthew, and we'll chat about using ELAP's listserv. I think I have your announcement from May 4th. So
That's right,
if
May
that
4th.
helps folks search, it was on May 4th. I know if they're anything like me, they have thousands of emails every day and easy to get buried. But we'll send it out through ELAP's listserv as well. And we'll make sure that that's the correct announcement and language and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll pause here. We'll see if I have any public comments. I don't think we will, but Matt, if you could just hang on to the line for
Yep, I'll be here.
5-ish minutes, and if we get any comments, we'll circle back to you. But realizing there is a delay, we don't want to let you go just yet. But with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is an update from the folks that run CEDN. So I see Tessa's online, and I'll let her give her introduction and demonstrate.
Hi there. How's my sound?
Sounds good?
Okay, great. And you can see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Tessa Fojit, and I work at State Water Board in the Office of Information Management and Analysis. And I'm here to talk a little bit about CEDN. So I hope at least some of you are aware, CEDN is the Water Board's data system for surface water quality in California. And the Water Boards is in the process of updating the CEDN data system and really specifically the data submission system. And we're calling that CEDN 2.0. So for finding data in the CEDN database, to access that, you're still going to continue to do that through our CEDN query tool or the California Open Data Portal. So this is just focused on the data submission system. So we are working with Earthsoft, which is a software vendor. Some folks may be familiar with their Equus platform. And so we are developing a new customized data submission system for CEDN. And the goals of this are to have a more user-friendly interface for submitting data, and improved understanding of data quality, and also just a modern, secure data system that we can keep updated. So we're still sort of in our first development phase. We haven't really launched this to the public yet, but later this year, we are planning to launch our chemistry data module, or like our water quality data. And then probably shortly following that, in the next few months, we'll also have like field results and habitat observations for folks who are out collecting in the field. And then over time, we will be working on developing further modules to cover all the data that we currently accept in CEDN, as well as adding continuous data, but that's more field type of data, so not as relevant for this group. So some of the CEDN 2.0 features, it's going to have an interactive user interface to check data. So a user will upload their data, check it, which that part's pretty similar to how data are submitted to CEDN right now. And then it has, this like user interface where if there's an error, the cell will be highlighted. And then there's also, description of the errors, and you can also like download the list of errors as well. And I'll demonstrate that later at the end of the presentation. So the chemistry quality control verification checks and flags, that is where the labs can really come into play. So there we're going to have a list of required quality control samples per batch. That'll be based on like method and analyte combinations. There's going to be recalculation of all the control limits. So like spike recoveries, RPDs, RSDs, if those are relevant, as well as holding time checks. So if any of those are, if there's a holding time violation or if the spike recovery is outside of control limits, that's not going to make, you still be able to submit those data. It's not like the data would be rejected, but they would be flagged. So usually labs flag those things already, and then the system, so that will be maintained, and then the system will add an additional flag in a separate column, just in case the lab didn't flag those things properly. So, and I'll go into a little more detail on some of those things after this sort of overview. So, and then finally, just the improved security of the system. It'll be, instead of just being totally open for anyone to check a file and submit it, you'll have to log in to a portal to be able to do that. So just a little more security. So right now, we already have available the CEDN 2.0 chemistry data template. So people could start looking at that to if they're trying to reprogram their limbs, because it's slightly different from our current CEDN template. And then we also have our first draft of the chemistry data submission guidance document where it walks through in more detail, how to populate each field and describes it, and, especially how to report QC results and things like that. So those are available on our website now. So this next section, because this is the laboratory community, I'm going to get into some of the details of some of the key reporting differences that labs are going to find in the new system. And so we're sort of presenting this here, and then we're also going to have this in a document that we have posted to shared for public, just so that it's always a resource that's out there. So we do have some updated controlled vocabulary. This batch completeness check, so the recommended or required QC samples is new. The allowable parent sample types for laboratory QC samples, and then the accuracy and precision statistics. So because those are going to be recalculated, the percent recoveries and RPDs, those really have a lot of requirements for how they're reported. So the updated controlled vocabulary. So we tried to keep a lot of the vocabulary the same, but there are some significant changes. So our sample type names are changing. They're going to be a little more written out. So like, for example, right now we have LCS for lab control spike, but in the new system, it's going to be written out as lab control spike 1 and lab control spike 2. And part of our goal is this system, we want it to be easy to use for not just the very technical lab community, but also for more community scientists, tribes, other groups who also submit data. And we want them to be able to understand what the words are instead of if they don't know all those acronyms the way that this group might. Matrix names, some of those are changing. The biggest one is we currently call it sample water for, general ambient water samples, and that's going to be changing to surface water, and it's even a shortened code of just surface W. So there's just going to be some things like that where you will probably need to make changes in your limbs to work with that. Another one I wanted to highlight is all of our standard methods and ASTM methods. We are updating those so that they include the year, because we're trying to be consistent with how ELAP is calling all of those methods. And so it should be consistent with what's, in your ELAP certificate. The next one I want to talk about is batch completeness checks. So there's basically a recommended list of quality control samples per analytical batch. And so those required samples vary based on your analyte or method. And so we will share that list publicly. So for, bacteria methods, we usually require a laboratory duplicate. And then for certain types of those methods, we also require a blank. So we will share, that sort of comprehensive list so that labs can be aware of what we consider the minimum QC for different methods. Now, you can still submit data with incomplete batch QC, but they will just be flagged as I was describing before. So you may have your own qualifiers, and then this will be the system qualifier that says, incomplete quality control. So this may impact usability by the water boards. So you may find some clients that are more focused on making sure those QC results get reported and are complete. And I will just say if additional QC samples are analyzed beyond what are minimum requirements, those can also be submitted. Those won't be an error. It's not like a limitation. Okay, next one is the allowable parent samples for laboratory QC. So, and I'm specifically talking about the lab QC that use an environmental parent sample, so matrix spikes and laboratory duplicates. So in CEDN 2.0, field QC samples cannot be used to generate lab QC. Really, field QC and lab QC serve different purposes. And so, part of it is we just don't want to mix those up. Field QC are intended to indicate if there are issues in the field collection versus lab QC should just reflect what's happening in the lab. So if you're using a field blank for a matrix spike, that's really not reflecting the environmental matrix. So that isn't, serving that data quality indicator purpose. So that wouldn't be a valid parent sample for a matrix spike or a lab duplicate. Similarly, field replicates, their intended purpose is to, indicate precision for the field sample collection. So those shouldn't also be used to indicate laboratory accuracy or precision. So this is going to take a little more sample control within labs to ensure those aren't happening. So if a field QC sample is used to generate lab QC, for a field blank, those data are just not going to be considered valid. Like you can't submit those if you used a field blank for a lab dupe or a matrix spike. And so then you would just have incomplete QC. Now, where this issue is going to come to a head is where you have blind samples, so particularly blind field duplicates. The lab really shouldn't know. That's the whole point of being blinded. So in that case, the recommendation is that basically you switch the sample type of the blind field duplicate and the parent grab sample and just switch the identities of those so that your blind field duplicate becomes your parent. So yeah, just a heads up that you may need to make sure your sample control is aware of this to ensure these are being tracked properly. Okay, and then accuracy and precision statistics. So as I said, the system will recalculate percent recovery on all spikes and RPDs for duplicates and our SD for triplicates or more replicates than that. So the parent sample results must be reported for all QC samples to allow the system to do that recalculation. So that's particular for matrix spikes and laboratory duplicates. So to be able to recalculate the percent recovery and et cetera, even when you use a non-project sample, if you have multiple projects or clients in your analytical batch that you're running, right now in CEDN, people can use that as their required QC. But we are going to require that you also report the parent sample result even when it's non-project. So that data would be anonymized. We provide, a list of like default values for your, sampling location, your project agency, things like that. But you will have to include that non-project parent sample if it was used for lab duplicate or matrix spikes. So I know most labs don't do that right now. So that is definitely going to be a change in reporting for many labs. All right. And then in addition, the system allows just a specific variance for percent recoveries and RPDs. So if the reported RPD or percent recovery varies by more than 1 or 2, depending on what it is, from what the system recalculates, that's going to give an error that prevents the data from being submitted because it's saying the results you're reporting here don't line up with how you calculated your percent recovery or RPD. And so this, we realized, is an issue for some labs because the system, CEDN 2.0, is just going to use the reported results to calculate those statistics. But we learned that a lot of labs use the raw instrument values for those calculations. They're just kind of automatically defaulted to those in their LIMS or in their system. And so that can be an issue. That variance may be exceeded. And this is especially common for RPD when you have it at very low concentrations, whatever the units, if it's like below 1, that is more likely to happen. So the reported results, should reflect the resolution and sensitivity of the entire analytical method, not just the instrument. And so those accuracy and precision statistics should also just be based on the resolution and sensitivity of the method, not using those raw instrument values, because that doesn't actually reflect the entire process. So I know this may be a significant effort for some labs if they have to reprogram their LIMS to do that. But we actually, this is like to truly reflect the quality of your method and your results. This would be the right way to calculate those statistics. So those are all the big technical topics I wanted to cover. And then I'm just going to talk a little bit more about our sort of transition in this next few months. So we are trying to do a lot of outreach right now as we approach going live to the public. So we've been talking a lot to our internal groups and the water boards, so everyone is aware. We've been trying to send out email announcements to lots of lists, and I think it went out on the ELAP list that some recent updates to CEDN. We do have a CEDN user group, and there are a number of labs who attend that. Those are quarterly meetings, and we do provide more detail regularly on updates of our data system and our current data system as well as CEDN 2.0. So I do encourage labs to join at least that email list if you are interested in staying up to date on CEDN. We do have our CEDN regional data centers that we've been coordinating with. Those are not going away. They're still going to be submitting even in the new system, and we're working with them. And then this group here, we are trying to reach out to keep up with the lab community. But yeah, if you have other suggestions on how to better infiltrate the lab community with this information, we would take those. So I did just want to touch on our current CEDN data submission system is still functioning right now. We did get a new website for our CEDN program, and it has a new URL. So just want to share that. And our we did do recently some updates to our current seed-in data checker, as well as our query tool. We're going to be updating that soon. So our next steps, we're going to have more guidance coming soon. So kind of all the things I just talked about today will be in a document that we'll post probably in the next couple of weeks, especially unless you guys have some really great feedback, and I'll add that in before we post that. And then later this summer, we are expecting to go live with public use of the chemistry module for submitting data. And so that at that time, we will no longer be accepting data in the existing current seed-in templates, and you will have to submit chemistry data in the new templates in the new seed-in 2.0 system. So we will, as we get closer to that date, because we don't have an exact date, we will send out, lots of email blasts and try to spread that word to make sure people are ready. And we do have a seed-in inbox for anyone who wants to reach out, has questions. I have, we do schedule just like one-on-one meetings with individual organizations, and we'd be happy to do that with labs as well if you have questions or want to talk through some of the issues that you're concerned about with this transition. So that's all that I have, but definitely would be interested in hearing any feedback, questions, comments, so that we can make this a successful transition. Oh, just kidding. I'm going to do a demonstration. I got it. Okay. Let me show. So if anyone hasn't gone yet, this is our new website. We got a nice date. And you can find information about seed-in 2.0 here. So this is where we have, if you just scroll down, this is where we have the chemistry template and the submission guidance document, if you want to review those. Our seed-in user group, we have all of our meeting notes and slides here. So if you want to review what's been discussed or join the email list, you just email our inbox. But otherwise, it's a lot of the same information we've always had. And then I'm going to do a little brief demonstration of the new data system. So have a login page where you would put in your login information. And then you'll land on the main menu. And so there's two modules for submitting vocabulary requests if you need to add vocabulary to the system. So, labs, we don't usually expect you to be adding, projects or sampling locations. That's usually more for project leads. But sometimes you may need to request new chemistry related vocabulary. So there's a new method that came out that we haven't added to our system yet, for example. So then you would go there to request that new method and any analytes associated with it or things like that. And then I'm just going to go here to the data checker to give a little demonstration of this. So it lands on the instruction page, just so people know how to navigate. And then if you have a smaller file, so 750 records or less, then you can go here and use the more interactive page. So you will click on this button to upload your file. And this is my good test file. And then I'll click the check button so that it will check it for all the things we talked about. So the database vocabulary and then those quality control checks. So does it have all the required QC? Do the control QC results meet the control limits, things like that. So this one says data check completed with errors. So please resolve those before submitting. And so down here, this is shows the errors. And if you click on that little thing, it gives a little more description. So it looks like I forgot to report the percent recovery for some of these. And so if we scroll over, so there's for anyone who knows current CDIN, in the current system, we have you enter the percent recovery and RPD in a comment field. So it's just like free text. Whereas here in the new system, these are separate fields that are numeric. So your percent recovery, RPD, those are just separate fields that you just report the numeric result. So you see this highlights red to show me these are the ones you forgot to populate. And those are lab control spikes. So that's why you would need to have a percent recovery. So it's telling you based on that sample type, you have to have the percent recovery populated. So once I resolve those, I would, check it again. And then if once I resolve it, it should let me submit the data by pressing this button over here. If you have larger files, we would have another option where you upload it and it just takes a little longer to check, and then you just get an Excel file back of the errors. It doesn't have this like interactive interface where it's going to highlight cells for you, just because that would get unwieldy with like 1,000 records to try to page through. But if you have a smaller data set, and so this part may be more aimed at are, like we were saying, the smaller community groups, smaller organizations that may be doing their own things. And, if your lab and you're submitting larger files, especially like organics, you're going to go over here and just get the list of errors in Excel. And then you would have this this piece down here that shows any files that you have submitted so that you can kind of track those and you can download and it shows the status. So if the green check says like that was successfully uploaded and submitted. Okay. So that was all I was going to demonstrate today. So now if you have any feedback, I'd be happy to hear it.
I have some feedback. Thanks, Tessa, for that intro. I think it's cool. I always like updates to things, especially legacy systems. A couple things that come up from my perspective as a lab. I wrote a couple things down, so I'll like get them all. But for the required QC elements, you were saying that you can't use, it's not permitted to use field blanks or field duplicates or those kinds of field QCs. In our lab, in a production environment, we don't look at those, right? We just grab 20 samples in a batch and the analyst will grab one at random, usually without looking at the sample. They'll just pick one out of the list and use that as the field sample. So we likely would not know that they picked a field blank or something until way down the line in the process, because it would just be somewhat impractical from our perspective. I don't know how some of the labs handle it, but we just process too many samples to know. And we try not to have the chemist know, because right, we treat every sample the same, right? You don't want to be like, oh, special treatment for this one or that one. Now they just grab 20 and push them through and grab the next 20 and push them through. So it might be a little tough on our side because we won't catch those until kind of late in the process. The other thing is that for some sites where it's difficult to sample, we're just not getting enough sample to do like matrix spikes or lab duplicates or that kind of stuff. So those might be missing as well if it's a challenging site to sample. Not all of our customers like sending extra containers. Like we'll send them the bottles and they'll just bring back the minimum. So I don't know if that's difficulty or unwillingness, but it is sometimes challenging to get enough sample volume for matrix spikes. I'll open it to anybody else if there's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I would just say, especially for the like not getting enough volume, and that may be fine for their project, like that may still meet their project objectives. It's like for us, it's just more information so that we can decide if it meets our objectives that we may want to use that data for.
But it won't, sorry, it won't reject the upload, right? Maybe I
Correct.
misunderstood
Yeah.
that. Oh, okay. Oh, that's
Yeah,
fine.
no, you
Okay.
can still upload and
Okay.
use the batch with incomplete QC. It's
Okay.
just going to add a flag on there that says, missing matrix spikes.
Cool. Okay.
So it's more just flagging it for at least our water board's information, so that when we maybe use that data for looking at assessing it for integrator report or something like that, we are more aware of the quality that can be evaluated.
Can I add to the first comment about the sample selection? So totally know that that is a change for the lab community. We're hoping to create more of a system where the sample intake is really more in tune with what samples are being brought in, and then those samples would be excluded from your selection pot, if you want to call it that. I know some labs actually just randomize it. It's just grab 20 samples and the system selects which one you do the QC on just based on either position of that sample or whatever. So it's meant to be random, and we do want to maintain that. We don't want there to be a bias where you're selecting the right ones or whatever, but we're hoping that there's a mechanism for which the lab community can exclude those field QC samples from that selection pot. And so we're hoping to build that process because what we're seeing is a lot of times, we're getting these instances where field blanks are being used more readily for the lab QC than we'd really like. And so it negates the purpose of the lab QC in a sense. So that's what we're trying to like move as like hopefully a transition. We understand that there's going to be time, there's going to take some energy or will, I guess, from the lab community to make these changes. And that's why we're saying in some instances, you can either not submit that, and that's fine. The data will still be able to be submitted through the system. It just will be lacking those specific QC samples if, like, for instance, a field blank was used for a matrix spike. But in the instance where there's like a field replicate, there's some debate out there. And so we're trying to kind of socialize this new process and hopefully there'll be some corrective measures taken by the lab community. So that's the intent.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Augustine. Hey, I had another observation on how you calculate your QC recoveries. The way that labs are set up in their LIMS, they use the true values and not the reported values. Reported values are usually rounded down to either 2 or 3 sig figs based on how the labs are set up. But so that there may be, I'm not sure how big the difference would be in the end calculations, but there could be a discrepancy in that.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what we've seen is, I haven't really seen that become an issue where it exceeds the variant, where the discrepancy is too large with like percent recovery. It's really with RPD, and it's really when you're at low levels that if the numbers are below 1, that's where that discrepancy becomes much more noticeable and can exceed the variance of the system. I guess for us, from a quality management perspective, those statistics, precision should be reflecting the precision of the overall method. And those rounded values are actually, the resolution you can see with that method. So that's what we want those statistics calculated with. I don't know if you want to add anything, Andrew.
I have one more. I mean, I agree with Sushmita that we process data the same, so it might be challenging. I assume the Seeding 2.0 is not doing any math, right? It's a repository of data. So we put all the numbers in and you're using our numerical values, correct?
Well, it is doing the math. I guess that's the issue.
So
it is
we're not
doing the math.
populating that RPD
Well,
number.
you are populating it, and we are doing the math and confirming that
Okay.
your value is correct, that you did your calculation correctly.
Yeah, I think there might be a discrepancy because I think our system will calculate based on the initial input into the limbs, not the rounded number. Yeah. There likely will be. I mean, it'll only be an issue at very low, detection, like small values, but yeah, we might see some discrepancies, for sure.
Yeah, and so that is an error that will prevent submission of the data. So that's why it is something we wanted to highlight here with this group.
We found a workaround was to change the output from the instrument to better reflect the sensitivity of the method.
Clarifying, you're rounding at instrument before it goes in. Okay. And that helps with the overall rounding. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a little different from what we do for other programs, because we're teaching our analysts not to round before the calculations, because you may impact your final outcome. So now we're switching back to rounding before the fact. Going to be a challenge.
So the other thing I had is for inputting non-project data, like if we use a source sample that's not going to be uploaded to Seedin, we might have some pushback from customers that don't want that, even though it's anonymized. And I just have vibes that some folks would be not pumped about having the data floating around, even though it's anonymized and randomized. No way around that, right?
No, there's no way around that. Yeah, I guess I'm curious, like, because it should be totally anonymized. I don't know. That provides comfort to anyone, but yeah, I guess if they really don't submit data to Seedin, then they wouldn't really want to talk to us. But I'm like, I'd be happy to talk to people.
I think some folks just are very conservative with their data from our experience, even though it's, I'm sure it's not a big deal. I'm sure the anonymizing data is totally fine. But yeah, I think we have some folks that might get the heebie-jeebies from having their data flown around.
Understand.
Well, yeah, we'll mitigate it on our end.
How would you report the matrix spikes in Seedin? Like, for example, if it's not my sample, I'm using somebody else's, the lab is using somebody else's sample. How would I report that data? Do I have to disclose the ID of that parent sample, or just the lab ID is fine?
Yeah, so it will it's really the link for us is actually the lab batch ID. That's a required field in Seedin, is that you have to have a unique name for the analytical batch. And so that's how we, can link it, as that's the parent sample. But, a project name, a sampling location, that's all a default value. It's just like lab QA, sort of default values. So and we don't even need like a sample ID, really. It's just based on that batch and
that may work. Yeah, if we don't have to disclose the sample ID, the sample location and actual site location, that may work with the clients.
Yeah,
I think
yeah, that's the
yeah,
intention.
we'll have to make the case to them. I just know that some folks want it under no circumstances. It's like super secret that their water's clean. Um, but it's just, yeah, well, we'll deal with that on a case by case. Yeah, I think if we just can upload the sample or our lab ID and not any other identifiable information, should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually the requirement too. So
I'm looking over. I don't think we have any comments at this time. But if we
No
do,
comments.
I'll circle back to you, Tessa. But
sure.
appreciate Tessa, appreciate you coming in. I also appreciate Andrew Hamilton. He's the assistant deputy director at OEMA who oversees CEDN and a whole bunch of other stuff. Stepping in and clarifying for some things too. So folks were wondering who that was. Really appreciate your input here, and hopefully you got some good information for the next round of information to go out.
Yes, definitely appreciate it. And if anybody thinks of more feedback or questions, we really want to make it a smooth transition for labs. So be happy to provide more information or in another format or whatever folks are wanting. We really want to provide good customer service on this. Thank you all.
Thank you. We're moving on then next to our next agenda item, which is a resolution to the methylene chloride work group that we had. So I passed around documents, and those are also posted on the webpage for those members of the public that are listening in. They're draft. The committee's going to discuss them now. So if anyone had any comments that they wanted to submit on this topic, please let us know. I'm going to share the screen here, and then I'll pass it to Augustine to give a brief update, and then we can walk through if anyone had any specific comments. Thumbs up to everyone's screen.
Yeah, so by the last meeting, we talked about maybe having an info sheet or something to help labs navigate this upcoming ban on methylene chloride usage. So we put together this document to kind of give people some guidance. It's not meant to be, end all be all, super complete. I mean, I think it has all the relevant information. It's easily digestible for folks to kind of understand what's needed and when. Yeah, mostly for help. I think there were no major comments or revisions from the committee. So if anybody has anything now, we can edit it, make changes, and get it pushed out.
Chunk-wise, if anyone has any comments in the first couple sections, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on, scroll to the next section, and then the last section here where we cover everything. Again, this is a document that I think would be useful to post on ELAP's webpage as coming from ELTAC. We are working internally with some of the water boards programs to see if we can get an ELTAC logo, because we wouldn't be able to publish it with the water board's logo. There's a bunch of rules. I don't really understand all of them, but I'll just say that since it's coming from you guys, it'd be nice to have your own logo. And so that's something that we're working on. We'll see how much movement we can get on that. But if anyone's got any things here, this is a lot of information that I think is useful for laboratories to come from more laboratories. Like exposure limits and OSHA rules are not something that are ELAP's forte, right? We're not OSHA. So it's more helpful to come from you all and to be shared with you all than it is to come from us.
Under operational impacts, I don't know if would be Note that for method redevelopment, only certain methods are allowed even to go to micro extract. So there is some restrictions there as well.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's where permitted, we should specify. It shouldn't be all willy-nilly changing everything. It'd be great, but yeah, not allowed.
Any other comments from the committee? Do you all like it? All dislike it? Go ahead.
Again, this might be too, just under these operational impacts, just noting what the impact is, because for example, for respiratory, if we have to, use respirators or scuba, like that is not just a cost impact, it's an operational impact, a cost impact, and an
Training.
insurance impact. Additionally, same with the dermal for the cost impact when it comes to and those gloves the gloves that are compatible with methane chloride aren't necessarily compatible with the other solvents that are in these methods. Actually creates a little bit of a conundrum. Have an analyst. Just something along the lines of what the impact is, because to a layman, they may not understand that this has significant impact in the laboratory. It's not just adding a different pair of gloves. Thinking of the language that
And maybe we should also indicate that people should review this, with their management, their quality systems, everybody, because it's not like, don't say, well, I have this paper from ELTAC and this is the Bible. It's test it, see what makes sense. And it's not, these are not fit for all situations, all laboratories, right? If like not really practical. So yeah, it should be.
Do we have to make a decision now, or can we have some time to kind of review these documents? Because like in our agency, we have our environmental health and safety put together some kind of control plan for us, and then we can really compare the information to see what's missing, and then just add some comment in there for future references.
Yeah, if you want to vote to give it to Kelvin to finish and then have Kelvin be the final approver if you guys want, or if you want it to come back to the next committee meeting and vote on it with other revisions like that too, we can do that as well. Have it circle back. So, okay, so Shushmita and Kelvin, I'm volunteering you to come with comments. You guys, so this is the Bagley Keene thing again. So you guys can share it with no less than a quorum or no more than a quorum of members, right? So if you guys want to break out into groups and discuss it in small groups, you just can't have it discussed with everybody all at once, right? Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. You can share with the lab community, of course. The draft will be posted. I'll add these little comments up there. We'll put a little updated one with the track changes. And then if you want to come back, the headache is going to be if everyone has a lot of different changes all at once. And that's where the committee rules are going to prevent sharing and discussing. So if you have more than one, bring your own, and then we can look through all of them and say, we like these comments, we don't like these comments. Okay, so what I'm hearing is Kelvin's going to take lead. Shushmitha will share with her community. So for committee members, be careful if you're going to talk to Kelvin. right? Because he could be that spoke on the hub for the quorum of members, right? Does that make sense? So, what I'm saying is, Kelvin, keep track of how many committee members talk to you. Don't once you get the fourth one, fifth one, then say no more. No more talking to me, right?
So if
Go
Sushmitha
ahead.
sends it to her to like the CBA group, that's a lot of folks. Like I'm
Yep.
in that. Is that? I'm
That's
sure
fine.
we're gonna hit quorum there. Okay.
Because that'll be going through her. I don't know. Just do your best. I don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you're in one of those groups, just and you're seeing those go around, and you've already talked to somebody, then ignore it. Yeah. You can't have the committee discussing things that the public doesn't also have access to. So since you're sharing it with the public, that's fine. But it's the okay. So I'm hearing I'll post this change unless anyone has any more updates here. I'll post this and then everyone will come back at the next meeting and maybe it'll be done. Does that sound good?
Great.
Okay. I don't think we need to vote on that. I think it. And I'm looking online to see a couple heads nod or something to say that sounds good to us too. Okay, good. Seeing some heads nod. You can do thumbs up or whatever. The digital ages that we live in is very fun. So there we go. Perfect. Okay, so we'll save that here. We'll post that probably at the meeting recording. So give us about a week to have the updated thing, and I'll send out a link to all the committee members saying, "Hey, the page got updated." Up to date item. Look into comments. Nothing. Okay. If we get any, we'll circle back to that topic as well. Okay, next up on our agenda is information about helium, everyone's favorite gas. This is, and Augustine, I'll prompt you because I don't remember where it started, but I know you got a copy of it. In terms of like how the helium letter came in. ELAP has added a couple comments too. We've gotten some questions from laboratories regarding like what they can and can't do if they want to swap to hydrogen. We had some labs asking about nitrogen as a potential gas, which is okay in a very small number of methods, and it has its own analytical challenges that I'm sure you all can elaborate on better than I can. But let's zoom that in. But this is again, another letter that's coming from ELTAC. If we have a logo, we'll put it on there. I don't know if we will or not, depending on how this gets resolved. But this is a letter that got passed around to a couple of the committee members, and so now we want ELTAC as a committee to decide what to do with it.
Yeah. So well, there was a small difficulty in the Middle East with the war and helium supply. So in our lab we get helium from Texas. It's mined. It's not so difficult, right? We usually can get some, but there's a thought that with the global interruption of supply elsewhere, that other industries would take priority over the lowly lab community in terms of helium. I think medical, obviously, yes, takes priority. MRIs need to be cooled, and that's important. But semiconductor manufacturing also, I think, takes priority. Questionable if it's more important. I don't know. But with this, we thought that it'd be good to put out there. And as a reminder, I think there was some stuff floating around a while ago about helium and what can and can't be done. And just want to put something together to help folks out, and also to give guidance so they're not stuck in a spot where they can like transition to method from helium to hydrogen or to nitrogen, and it's not permitted, or they did not do it the right way or whatever. So wanted to try to put that together as a resource for folks.
All right, opening up to the committee members for any comments. Please feel free to jump in. We have the breakout in loose categories of like what kind of analytical method that it falls under. Starting with hazardous waste, that's the most flexible, and you're going to have the most ability to swap without really going through. ELAP added in a couple items here where you would need to submit an application, right? If you're changing methods from 8260B to 8260D for whatever reason, right? You need an application to go in with that. Same with the Clean Water Act, right? If you're moving from, I don't remember all the method numbers, I'm sorry. We have way too many of them. But if you're moving from one method to another method, and that's the impetus for your change, that's going to need an application. So we try to sprinkle in some things there of like when you would need the application versus when you'd be able to make the change at your own laboratory, provided that you go through all the validation and et cetera, all the things that are required when you're making a major instrument change. These are pretty major.
And I would hazard for it. So where you can change it legally, make sure you're cool and doing it the right way. But there are challenges, right? It's not just a simple swab. You can't say, "Oh, perfect. I'm just gonna get some hydrogen and make it work." Not all methods or systems or techniques are amenable to doing that, right? Even though it's permitted, doesn't mean it's going to work, right? Like especially if you're looking at GCMS, you have hot metal, hydrogen, organics that just loves to do stuff to make chemistry. In general, you don't want to make chemistry in your GCMS source. So, like when you're making these changes, make sure you're thinking about, yes, the regulatory side, what's permitted, what's not permitted, what needs new applications, what needs ATPs or whatever it is, but also in the practical sense of what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Like a good example is nitrogen as a purge gas. It's cheaper than helium. It's not as good. You get a lot of water in there, so you have to be sure that your methods are up to date. Your concentrators will handle that kind of water, and you're not going to get issues down the line. So there are practical considerations that need to be considered, that need to be worried about, I guess, as you make these changes. Besides the legal, can you or can you not make the changes?
So we've had some questions, and I'll jump in here. And I don't know. You feel free to interrupt me if you want. But we've had some questions more specifically on Clean Water Act than drinking water. Drinking water, I think, is pretty well understood that you can't really make a change. The EPA sets it in stone, and maybe it'll change. Maybe they'll bring in some new stones to update it. I won't hold my breath though. But for Clean Water Act, right? We have a nice section about how to move through. You're always welcome to reach out to us, or we're probably going to defer you to your permitting authority, right? So if you're asking us, hey, can we use this for this specific project? We're going to be like, I don't know. We don't write permits. So if your permit says you can do something, then maybe you can do it, and we wouldn't have knowledge of that. But we have gotten a couple. We are reaching out to EPA. We are hoping that we're going to get some more information. Somebody asked specifically about nitrogen and one specific method that they've studied. I don't have an answer for a lot of those. We are waiting for EPA, and EPA isn't the fastest entity to respond to questions. So as much as information as we have, we will share it with you, but you're always welcome to ask questions. I do like the sections that we've set up here too, and like each specific area, and then in broad kind of general what you're going to do if you're going to modify a method. But happy to take any notes, any comments, or anything like that, any changes.
Oh, I guess I'll talk. So yeah, I take a look at this morning. It looks very comprehensive with a lot of information. I wish that I have more time to review it. I think something that at least my lab experience is that when you want to make some changes to see whether it's compatible with alternative gases, you definitely want to consult with the manufacturer first, right, to see whether the setup is compatible. Because like when we try to switch over from helium to hydrogens, we have to make a lot of part replacement, right? You have to use the stainless steel lines. You probably have to change the tri-bed filters more often. And then, of course, you may have to make some modification too. So I would make sure that you consult with the manufacturer first. And then in our experience, it doesn't work well with nitrosamine too. Yeah, obviously, right, for the chemistry reason. So yeah, making sure that you talk to lab, talk to your manufacturer before you make any switches, and then purchasing any parts too.
And kind of along those lines with the title manufacturer, um, I don't know about most labs, but I think a lot of labs have systems that sit more often than run. So talk to your manufacturers, make sure you're have the right, valves and equipment and flow controls in place to put it on standby mode, switch it to nitrogen when it's not in use. Like it doesn't make sense if you're running a GCMS once a week. It doesn't make sense to just flow helium through that thing 6 other days a week to make sure your column doesn't oxidize. So yeah, there's other ways to do so. Yeah, reach out to the vendors and they would love to sell you more parts and more things to help you out. But in the long run, it would be for sure cost savings and operationally efficient to do that stuff.
You're not requiring any additional accreditation kind of requirements, right? Like obviously the lab will do an MDL and IDOC, but beyond that, you're not requiring like a PE.
If it's the same method.
If it's the same method, correct.
If it's
Okay.
the same method, no. But if it's a different method, yes.
Yes, of course. All right.
But yeah, you still have to have all that stuff before you swap. So if you can afford it, having two instruments, one that you're tinkering with and one that you're doing production samples on would be ideal. Because as everyone here can probably attest to, there are always complications that show up for any change that you're doing like that. So you might have to send some samples out while you're trying to make the switch if you can do it immediately. So something that you will have to have before you make that swap. You'll want to make sure it's comparable to what your instrument is. So that's what the purpose of redoing all of your validation is. You got to have new MDLs, new DOCs, updated SOPs, and then especially like if your MDL's changing, you'll want to have approval from your clients, right? That's a big thing that, hey, our instrument can't reach that limit anymore. Like if you don't meet the DLRs for drinking water after swapping to hydrogen, you're gonna have to swap back because you're not gonna be able to report that data. So that's another idea that you're gonna need to explore is your client gonna be okay with that swap?
And the other thing to consider is the things change, weird things happen. So like if you're running helium and you go to hydrogen and you're like running a non-selective detector, your resolution is going to be different. I mean, obviously probably better, but you might have some weird things, some elution or it could switch, some things that happen. So when you do the validation, you should do it right, not accidentally report something wrong for a long time. Because you forgot to check when you switch. So yeah, there's stuff to worry about for sure. And I think the vendors will help a lot with that because they also want to make sure that like if you're buying a GC column from one vendor, they might have data on helium and hydrogen and give you some parameters, some starting points. So it might help to do that.
Might be worth it to mention in this day and age now, switching to hydrogen, the hydrogen generators often add more safety than when you have places you have restrictions on the canisters. They're also more efficient.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of scary storing a bunch of hydrogen. So yeah, people should make it. That's the move. That's a good point. Yeah, probably gonna get worse performance for some of these with nitrogen. So that's actually great. Yeah. I would, if it's easy enough to include in the survey, yeah, include if they're using helium nitrogen, what method they're using, and then if they're using helium nitrogen, if they can meet the DLRs or if they have trouble, with helium, it's probably gonna be tough with nitrogen. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Good to have that.
Do you guys want to wait on this letter or do you want to approve it as is? You want to do a email vote? Yeah. Okay. If there's no changes, so if nobody's proposing any changes, then we can do an email vote. If people are proposing changes, then we'll hold off and we'll do a vote. So we'll check back in a month. In a bunch of thumbs up. So, all right. I like that plan. We can do the same with the methylene chloride info item too. We'll check back in a month. If there's no changes, we'll ask for an ELTAC vote via email, and then we'll post that on the page saying. If anyone has any comments or recommendations or changes, then we'll bring it up at the next ELTAC meeting. Okay.
But Chris, I just like to take that moment and thank everybody on the task force to come up with these letters. They are pretty comprehensive and pretty detailed.
I know it's been a lot of work for a lot of people. I've seen quite a few comments and red lines that came through. So it is really appreciated that you guys developed the task group to answer these. All right, with that, do you guys want to? We only have 2 items left on the agenda. One is for open public comment, and the other is for AI, and we'll discuss that in a little bit here. Do you guys want to take a brief 5-minute break, and then skip the lunch break and have lunch after the conclusion of those items? Head nods. Got a thumbs up from folks online too. So okay, we'll break for 5 minutes or maybe 10. Let's do 10. That's easier. And then we'll reconvene and close out the meeting here. Great. Thank you. There we go. All right. The meeting is resuming. All right. So item number 7 on the agenda is the AI use in laboratories. And on the last LTAC meeting, we had discussed forming a subcommittee to go over in more detail. There was a lot of interest to talk about AI use. We had vying for members. Unfortunately, due to scheduling, well, I'll just say scheduling conflicts, but it's really the amount of workload that not only myself, but subcommittee members had experienced. We haven't been able to meet with the subcommittee, but since it's such a topic of interest, we figured we might as well get more input from the full LTAC committee to help better guide that subcommittee's focus. So if you want to swap members on the subcommittee, we can do that here too. But we're going to redirect and open the floor for the discussion. So my notes for the last meeting for the subcommittee to prime and give Augustine a chance to focus his PowerPoint. What the charge for the subcommittee was to define what is artificial intelligence, and that could be a test of like if it meets these characteristics, then it is artificial intelligence, and then when it should or should not be used, and potentially for ELAP to develop regulations based on LTAC's recommendation of whether it should or should not be used, and in terms of like what detail those regulations might need to say. So for that, I'll pass it over.
Cool. Yeah. So, like Chris mentioned, we talked about it last meeting, and there was some interest. There's a lot of interest, and it was just tough to get everything put together and presented for the committee. So, since there was interest, what I'd like to do is kind of present what I put together. I started writing a way too long document for this. And it's like 19 pages. Like it's just way too much of everything. It's like a stream of consciousness of all things that maybe are relevant. So I try to condense it down to this PowerPoint, but more to get discussion going on what this group thinks. We should focus on what matters, what doesn't matter, things that I miss. I mean, again, this is all my opinion, and what I think would be good, which is not to say it's right or anything. So I'd like to get some input from folks and kind of guide that document. And like Chris mentioned, I think the goal from my perspective would be to have at the end some sort of regulatory landscape, not to make ELAP do more work, but kind of to make them do a little bit of work, and put some regulatory language together where they can say, hey, this is what we think is going to be a useful tool for assessing the ability to use artificial intelligence in the lab environment. Sorry to make you guys do some work, but I think that's the goal from my perspective. So again, a little bit of background. Artificial intelligence is big deal, right? I think this is going to be I think it's inevitable, right? I don't want to say we shouldn't use artificial intelligence because that's terrible. I don't want to be afraid of technology and afraid of progress. But this is going to be something like I'd imagine going from cutting out and weighing peaks on like strip chart recorders to like using a data system to integrate and stuff with a computer. It's different. It's potentially scary. But if you do it the right way, I think we can leverage it and be useful. And the goal would be to make it better for the lab, right? For the lab community, we want to have better data quality and more efficient laboratories so that get more samples out, more throughput, and provide more data to the end data users. So a couple of things that I thought were going to be important. So artificial intelligence, as we know it today, has a lot of weird nuances, right? So things that I thought would be important to get a hold of would be again, first and foremost, opacity of the algorithm. We want to make sure that we know what it's doing. We don't want to have a model where the AI system is a black box where you just put some data in and some stuff comes out and you have no idea how it happens. Regular software like chromatographic systems work on rules, right? If the peak has X slope at this point, then it starts integrating it as a peak and then it ends integration when the slope is X number or whatever. There's always going to be a rigid coded process and workflow. A lot of these AI models don't have that. So having opacity in how they're doing the calculations, how they're doing the math, how they're doing the deterministic, whatever it does in the background is important. The other thing that is inherent to AI models here is stochastic variance, right? That's the degree of randomness. So everything, if you use ChatGPT to make pictures or Gemini to make pictures, if you put in the same prompt 2 times, you're gonna get 2 totally different pictures, right? Because that degree of variance that is inherent to these AI models, which is great if you're making funny memes, not great if you're trying to process data that has implications. So we have to be able to control that in a way that makes it so that the process is always the same every time. Those are the 2 things that I've was worried about with this is that a lot of these AI models are based on huge training sets, right? And this is something that they leverage just massive amounts of data to do what they do. And that's kind of what's cool about them. You can have them scrape the entire internet and then predict how to write a essay for your 12th grade literature class or something. But in our cases, and I talked about this earlier, where a lot of our data is confidential. Right? Our customers need us to keep it confidential. We can't have it out there, even if it's anonymized or randomized. They don't want it out there using that data to train other data sets, other models. So there has to be a way to control where that data goes. So we have minimal data leakage and just unauthorized model training with our customer data, because that's kind of our currency. Our most important, thing is the faith in our customers. So making sure that we're not just spreading that all over the place to train models is important. And a lot of commercial models are based on that. So it's kind of a difficult spot to be in. And the last thing is that, speaking of training, as models get trained, they change. Right? So if you have a model today that is based on some base training data, and it works kind of well for what you want it, but as you put more data into it, it gets better and better and better and better. It's great because that model is more representative of what you're doing, whatever the process is. Problem is that now that model has changed and it's not reproducible. So if you were to go process your data from day one versus data 100 or data 100, they're going to be different, which is an issue because now you don't have, reproducibility of your data. You can't recreate your analytical results, and you have all kinds of other issues with your data quality if that doesn't stay the same. So being able to minimize drift or eliminate drift and have that model not get better or degrade over time is important. But also important is being able to identify it, be able to see, yes, this is changing or this is not changing or whatever is a big thing. So those are kind of the four things that I thought would be the vulnerabilities in using AI in the lab. So with those kind of issues, I put together 4 kind of directives of how we can guide these regulations and say these are things that you need to look out for or can and can't do, addressing those 4 things. So number 1 is auditability. That's the big one for me. I think being able to know what it's doing is important. So I think these are just ideas of what I thought would be a good thing to implement. I don't know how else to put it, but not like this is the answer, this is the best way, but this is what we should probably worry about. Excuse me. But it should be able to be auditable, right? At the very minimum, you should be able to see what happened, who did it, what the result was. If you can find the calculation, if it'll show the calculation or the math or the weighing or the variables that it used and all the parameters, that would be, I think, ideal. So it has to be something that can be digitally tracked and audited down the line, so that if you use an AI model to do some process in your lab today, in 5 years, you should be able to go and audit it and make that same assumption and look at the steps and say, yes, I understand how this happened and it makes sense. And I think that documenting it manually is not going to work. I think you can say, oh yeah, trust me, I checked it out. I've never been a big fan of just documenting observations because it's not quite raw data. I know there's cases where that is the raw data, but I think the true auditability should be a digitally signed, hashed audit trail that is non-editable, that can be retained for, or not forever, but for the life of your data retention policy. Also has to be able to be explained. So you have to be able to document the math, show how the math is working, how the weighing works, how the parameters are set up, how the randomness is turned down or turned to 0, to be able to justify a process. So if your model makes a decision or does something, you should be able to maybe not manually verify it, but look at all the steps and make sure that you can backtrack all the steps and make sure that actually happened. And then the biggest one, I think, is that you cannot trust these things. We're also going to be in the world of Terminator and Skynet. You have to have human oversight. Like, somebody has to look at it. I think the AI models are great in that they will provide tools to make it easier for the analysts to do their job, but you still have to have an analyst that will look at that data and say, yes, this makes sense, or I took the suggestion of the AI model and said, oh yeah, I agree or disagree or reject it or accept it or whatever. But a person, I think, has to be in that loop always. It can't just be running in the background. It's like an agentic AI model that just runs and does everything. Sounds great until something goes wrong and there's no bit of control. You have no idea what's going on. It's terrible. So I think the big sticking point is that somebody has to be looking at it. A human set of eyeballs. Then the reproducibility, like I mentioned, turning down the temperature so that the randomness is set to 0. You don't want to have the same prompt give you 2 different answers. It should be the exact same answer every single time. It also shouldn't be trained while you're working. I think it's fine to train the models, but once you have a model that's validated, you should lock it down, not train any further, and use that for the life of whatever you think is relevant. Now, on the side or in the background or on a separate system, yeah, you could train a model to make it better and better and better, and then on some day, once it's validated, switch it to the new model, give it a version number, just like we would a calibration curve in the lab or an SOP or whatever, and say, okay, everything after this day is processed against this model or this calibration curve or this SOP, and just version it out and have it be locked. And I think that's not a big ask. So that would solve a lot of the variance on day-to-day reproducibility on a model like this, and especially when touching customer data or client data. One thing that is kind of weird to me that I don't know how it would happen, but in our lab, we have a 10-year data retention policy. So we keep data, raw records. We actually keep them for a little bit longer, but we say 10 years. This changes fast. So if you have a model today, I don't know if it's going to be useful or even reusable in 10 years. Like, we have no idea what it's going to be like. So we're going to have to find a way to somehow be able to store these things. And there are options. There are like IT solutions for this that you can store like a version of the operating system in the model and all the things, all the parameters, all the libraries, all the dependencies, everything in one little packet. And I think that's doable. That might be overkill for this, but I think there has to be a way to be able to kind of recreate it down the line. Maybe 10 years is overkill. Maybe for this type of weird thing, we can make it 5 years. I think that's what TNI suggests or something like that. But we can go other more flexible options. But I think there has to be some guidance to keep it for some amount of time so that it is reproducible, just like we would, instrument software. If we process a calibration curve on a system, we want to have that software available so that we can verify and reprocess it, make sure that the number we got in 2001 or 2021. Wow, 2021. Wow, that was some 20 years ago. So 5 years ago is the same number today as it was 5 years ago. And then the way to kind of do that is, use these packets that you can standardize everything, put it together, and using what's called WORM, the write once, read many types of storages where you can set the model, finalize it, and then just process that multiple times. So I think there are options. It might be a little overkill, but something has to be done, I think, to make it usable in a number of years. And then the other one that I'm worried about, because I know our customers are worried about it, is getting that data leakage. So a lot of cloud-based AI models will use customer or your data, whatever you put into it, to train the model. So like if you're using ChatGPT every day, it'll use your weird inputs and the prompts that you have and all the memes you generate, and build the model up and make it better, better, and better, and use that for training data. But I don't think we'd be able to do that with this. I think it have to be something that if you're going to be training an AI model, it has to be local or edge computing, right? You're doing that processing locally on your own service. Maybe it's air gap, maybe not. I mean, air gapping is extreme, but something that you can, segregate that from the cloud so you're not accidentally getting data leakage, or making sure that your vendors or whatever using your cloud computing platform, making sure that they have a zero data retention policy, so that if you put anything in there, it'll process that data, it'll give you the result, but it'll scrub it as soon as you're done. So it's not keeping that and using it for training data. Something that I'm worried about, and I know our customers would be worried about it if I told them that we were using their data to train AI models. I wouldn't like it. Not any more than uploading to CDN, if they didn't have to. So those kind of things are the things that I think would be important to worry about in this type of regulation. I think it works well with the TNI Center. I saw that Chris has it open. That I think it does kind of work with how the TNI Center is written. There are things where we can mimic what an AI model would do. Like, really, in my opinion, an AI model should be like a person. You should audit it like a person. Like if you have a chemist running 8270, and a model doing whatever process, you should audit them the same. They should be auditable, and it should be the similar type of approach. So it should work well with the TNI standard. And then one thing that we should be careful, I mentioned earlier, is that recognizing bias and hallucinations and weird things is important. And I think maybe people who use AI a lot can see that, and people who don't probably don't, right? People will put into Google and say, what is this thing? And if it's a wrong, very, very confident response, they'll be like, oh yeah, that sounds right. But it's confidence, not correctness. So I think there's a little bit of training that needs to be done in labs that are implementing this to make sure that the user's actual human in the loop person knows if a result is good, if a result is bad, if it's suspect, if it's weird, if the model is drifting, to be able to identify that as part of ongoing training, per the NI standard. I also took a look at other industries. Like, we're not new to this. We're not pioneers in worrying about AI. I think a lot of people have been using AI for a long time and have been more worried about it than our industry. So I looked at what other folks are doing, and in the healthcare world, so like FDA has requirements on how you can validate models and change models. It's an interesting approach where they say, okay, we're going to change this model to do this thing. You validate it and then implement it. So I think something like that could work for our kind of application. But we have to make sure that it's validated. The validation is important. We have to make sure that it's validated for our use, right? If you go to a vendor, say a company says, I have this approved AI model that solves all of your PFAS integration difficulty. Just put all the data in our model and we'll spit out a report. You don't have to look at it ever again. We have to make sure that that would work. That seems very fishy. I wouldn't trust it at all, but maybe. And if it meets the requirements, sure. But we'd have to make sure that it works for the samples that you're running, right? If this was stuff that was validated on a very sensitive machine doing drinking water where you have huge peaks and very quiet baselines and no issues there, will it work on your system that is maybe less sensitive, or you have very complex matrix, your baseline is noisy, your background is dirty? Will it work there? So having that validation on your data set for your use case is going to be and there are a lot of models of, hey, this is good practice for machine learning or AI models. So following the industry standard, I think, would be helpful. Hard. Folks that are really worried about AI is financial people, right? Deal with money is never no joke. I guess people are more worried about it than healthcare for some reason. The FINRA folks came out with this first. But there are a lot of restrictions on how you can use AI models. There's essentially a straight prohibition of autonomous agentic AI models where there's no human in the loop. You can't do that in financial sectors, which makes sense. You shouldn't be able to do that anywhere. I think some software vendors like Amazon had tried to do that and made some AI model that made changes globally. Said, hey, this code seems weird. I'm going to rewrite the whole thing. Then it broke some AWS framework. So there's issues with having no human in the loop. So SEC and FINRA does have that requirement for record keeping and a human involvement. And the NIST has guidelines. They're kind of vague. They're not vague. They're more towards like fairness and equity and I don't know, things that maybe are less relevant for our field, but still a good guidance of where you can start in looking at models and how they behave and how they affect your data. And then ISO does have standards that are very robust. I think that's probably the best way to look at risk assessment. So maybe not in practical usage, but evaluating the risk of introducing an AI model to a lab. That ISO 42001 standard is pretty well written for that regard. And then, those folks are very risk averse. So there's a lot of risk mitigation in that standard, which is kind of nice. So I gave a couple of examples. These are things that I've talked about over the last couple of years on how people could use AI, and then like the relative risk of using it in a lab setting, right? The lowest one is going to be like your administrative simple things. And I think a lot of folks are using this now. They're using it to rewrite an email that sounds clunky. It's like, hey, let me clean this up and make it better. But we also use it for, scheduling field people or scheduling, reorder of consumables and automating that kind of stuff. Not a big deal, because if that goes wrong, the only thing that happens is you're inefficient in the field, or you don't have the right consumable at the right time, and you just have to order it on a rush, or subcontract that sample, or whatever. So the risk is minimal. I don't think there has to be any regulatory push for that. That could be documented in your regular policies. Keep your regular, cybersecurity things in place. Nothing crazy. The in between, the one that's I'm not sure if it's not touching customer data, but it is adjacent, would be doing something like we talked about earlier with COCs, using natural language processing to read a COC, interpret what a customer wants, and put that into your LIMS. So essentially bypassing the person who does the reading of the COC. Now you still have to have human eyeballs checked to make sure it was correct, and those checks are in place in most labs anyway. But I think that's not as critical because you're not manipulating customer data, right? If that goes wrong, then okay, you ran the wrong sample or the wrong method. It's bad, but it's not. There's an obvious problem. You can identify that problem. The issue there would be the proprietary information. So you don't want that customer data leaking out or using it to train other data. So if you have handwritten COCs, I don't think that the customer would want their handwritten COC being used to train other natural language processing models to interpret other COCs, right? Because that's, proprietary. So that'd be a zero data retention situation, but nothing more than that because it's not touching customer data. The one that is the most high risk, the one that has to be the most audited, the most validated, will be anything that touches data. So that could be interpreting results on an MS, doing library matching, integrating peaks on a chromatographic system, or colony counting in micro. Things that actually matter, that not that everything else doesn't matter, but things that will manipulate the data, that if the model gets it wrong, that result is incorrect. So that's where it has to be, an extremely locked down, validated model with a lot of controls and making sure that there's no risk or minimal risk. And of course, in every single one of these, there should be a human in the loop no matter what. Even the lowest risk, you should still have somebody making sure that you're not scheduling 5 couriers to go to the same location at the same time because it's inefficient. Even though it's not a big deal, it's just inefficient. You should have somebody looking at that stuff. So then I guess the goal of all this was to put together an assay for appropriateness. So like my thought from this exercise was we'd put together language, some background, some stuff to look out for, like whatever the requirement would be to help people understand it and say, this is why it's important. But at the end, it should be like a quiz, like a Turing test for the assay, so the AI model. Like if it doesn't pass all these requirements, then it can't be used in the lab. And that's where I'm medium. So I have like kind of lumped in all the things we talked about today of making sure it's not a black box, that it's auditable, that it's not random, that the temperature is turned down to 0 for stochastic variability, that you can recreate it after the fact, that you don't have data leakage, you're not doing unauthorized training, and make sure that it works for your method, your matrix, your sample set, or whatever it is. But it's something that I would like some input from the group that out as we go. So yeah, what do you guys want from, or what do you guys want from this? What do you guys see from this? Is this approach you want to see? What things matter? What things don't matter? Like open to, we're recording this, right? Okay. Then I'll listen to the recording later and then start putting together some stuff and hopefully trim down my absurdly long level of AI things.
I think a lot of it is just the training of the staff to understand that AI is not an arbiter of truth. It's a tool. It's just like when you assign automated integration, you go back and you check it. And what I've just seen psychologically is people are more likely to believe that AI opinion outweighs theirs than say if you're looking at an automated integration that isn't working. So I think that's honestly the biggest risk. I know you're saying there always has to be a human in the loop, but I think it needs to be rigorously emphasized in any of the direction that we give that this is fallible. It's not an infallible tool. It's a way to think of it as a really fast analyst that you still have to check up on.
And that's the like culture, the attitude is going to be really Now, you're right. People will say, well, I'm pretty sure the sky is blue. And then let me ask ChatGPT, it says it's green. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm colorblind. Maybe it really is green. So yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of like thought that the AI model is right and I'm maybe wrong. So that's a culture training problem. And maybe I don't say kids these days, but maybe. But I think it's important.
All right, we got hands raised online, so I want to make sure that they're involved too. And so I'll go down in order. John Franco, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Augustine. That was really great presentation. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the framework that you've provided. It should be really helpful to get this conversation going. Um, I wanted to say I really appreciated the touching on the validation. I think that's a key part of this that really is the principle that can kind of stay along with all of the changes in AI. I mean, one of the risks that I see is being overly prescriptive, and not being able to keep up with the change that is occurring in the industry with certain terms or approaches or applications of AI. So I'd recommend staying as generic as is useful. So yeah, keeping those terms of and principles like validation and record retention. One of the things also, I think it may be difficult to, practically apply some of the record retention, specifically when you're talking about these very large models that are used. It may not always be an issue, but certainly something I wanted to flag. It may be hard to keep track of the weights of models and so forth at the laboratory, but certainly having a record of what those are and would be useful. And these models are moving quickly, so keeping track of when these things were used also can be helpful. Another thing I wanted to mention about the data sovereignty or a related aspect to data is many of the methods are proprietary, either methods developed by laboratories or reference methods. And there are prohibitions to, adding those to a local model or using those in a model at all. So I just want to make sure we're also keeping track of that and keeping that on the radar and that there's some guidance there. And training is, as we try to wrestle with AI in our department, training is critical. And it's not just training on the evaluation of AI, but also how you steer AI, how you use it is really important. So having some best practices included in that training is useful because it's not just the model, it's how you use it. And then just being cognizant of the different ethical considerations in using AI, because you can bully AI to give you certain answers. So the conversation of ethics and ethical use of the tool, I think, is also important to keep in mind. So thanks again for your hard work on this. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate those points. Those are very valid and great points. And think of the method and proprietary technologies and techniques also should be included. So yeah, but yeah, I agree a lot with the bullying of AI. I think it's easy enough to make it do what you want to do with the right prompting. So that's also, I think, will go hand in hand with training as well. So that great points. Thank you.
I like what you had mentioned about treating it essentially like a controlled document within it, where you have different versions and whatnot, and treating it like that and putting the training as, all of our trainings are controlled documents and things for everything we do, and just treating something like this no differently, every X amount of batches or days or weeks or whatever that you put human eyes and verify this, that, and the other. And if something's wrong, you take it through the corrective action process like you would anything else, that you're doing in the lab.
Yeah, I think that's what makes sense. I mean, treating it like just another process in the lab. Like I would treat it not any different from any other control document, any other
Yeah.
analyst. Yeah.
If there's an issue, there's a process you go through to fix it and, define everything in your QA manual, and then in your, obviously have an SOP or a training checklist or something like that, incorporate it into your ethics training, that we have to do every so often anyways, and document all that.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's great points to include for sure. Yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Or just a question philosophically, for once we're at the tier 3, if you're having samples integrated and basically evaluated by AI, we flag when we do a manual integration. Should anything that's processed with AI be flagged?
So I thought about this a lot too, and it's going to be tough because at some point, every single sample will be processed. I know that not a lot, some vendors are already using or have AI-based models for peak integration. But that's just the integrator. It used to be a math equation that would look at the slope and the whatever of that curve. Now it's just an AI model. So it'd be tough to, it's yes, I think we should flag it, but it's tough. Like that line gets pretty gray when it's time. Yeah.
And that's the question, though. I do think we really do need it because AI is effectively different than an integrator because an integrator has a parameter. That parameter doesn't change.
Yeah.
Now we're putting a machine in there that is capable of changing the parameters based on its will, and that's, I think, I guess I still put it this way. Back when I started, we never flagged when we manually integrated because you had to manually integrate everything. And now, because it's, the exception. So I guess I see it as something where at least somewhere in our documentation, I think there should be something that states that AI was involved just for posterity to go back for reproducibility.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree.
That's a perfect example, right? Peak identification. Like you said, we used to do it manually. Now everything is automatic. We do have a process in place. So I think as long as we have a process and some way to verify that process, I think that's going to be the key, whether we go the AI route or not. I mean, we are going to go the AI route, but how and when and training is going to be so important.
And I saw your list of risks from minimum, medium to high, almost as a checklist, like the low hanging fruit, start off with the minimum, see how that works out. And if everything's going great, then okay, let's try some of these medium risk ones. And
I think that's the right approach. I think our LIMS is looking at that as well, where you're taking the easy stuff, the stuff that's less impactful first, and then in my opinion, I think it should be documented like you would the highest risk and see how that goes. See if the documentation works, see if the validation works, if the process holds before you do like a challenge, like a aggressive challenge test for it. So yeah, I think that's the way to do it. Went slowly. And I think, again, I don't want to be fear-mongering. I don't want to say, no, we shouldn't use technology, but,
Saguna, go ahead. You've been very patient.
Oh, thank you. Everybody can hear me this time around?
Much better, yes.
So my question is, it comes back to the question of what is AI, because what I'm hearing is when we talk about version control and being able to go and reproduce data, I think we have to clearly define what a software is and what its capabilities are versus what AI is and what its capability and potential is. Because I think there is an overlap because most softwares in the market that are specific for either instrumentation or LIMS or for any kind of documentation control, they all do have version controls and they do also have all these capabilities. AI is at the other end where it pulls out data from all this and there is a different kind of interpolation, trending and decision making involved. So at some point I think it's essential for us to kind of clearly define what is software. For example, in our agency, our agency specifies that our data should not be put into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. They do have GovAI that we are allowed to use. For government agencies. So it's already restricted in terms of what can be put in there or not. So, but on the other hand, if it's an approved software, there is this protection in terms of data as well as an ethical use of it. I'm just curious what the group thinks about that.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I think from my perspective, it really just is software. Like an AI model that you're using to do a process is going to be no different than version 14.1 of Mass Hunter for Agilent mass specs. The thing that's a little bit different is that the versioning from Agilent is they push the version, right? They make the updates, they hard code everything, and they'll send it out to you, and then you make a update to your SOP. Oh, we're using, starting this date, version 14.2 instead of 14.1. But the risk with an AI model is that your versioning could happen, from one day to the next, or from the morning to the afternoon. You process 1,000 samples. You add 1,000 samples worth of training data. Now the model's different. So I think versioning would have to be a more granular approach. From my perspective, where you're versioning like for example, if you use a calibration curve that lasts for 2 months for some method, all the data processed between those calibration curves will correlate to that one calibration curve, so that your version would be calibration done on May 19th. I think we could do the same thing or something similar with an AI model. It's like, okay, this training, the model was trained up until May 19th, and now this is version 519, whatever the version would be. And you're using that version until you make an update and then do that internally. So there has to be control internally to keep that together. But yeah, I agree. I think it just treating it like a software and the versioning makes sense. So that's, yeah, good approach and good ideas.
And that's similar to how we acquire MDL data, where you're just, the more blanks you use throughout the year, the more it changes it's a constantly changing
Number, yeah.
number.
But the difference there is that the MDL does not change the sample result, because sample result
Right.
stays the same. So even though your MDL, goes up and down or changes.
But it's essentially learning throughout the year.
Yeah.
Until you set an end date
And you close it, yeah.
and you close it.
My window for.
Right.
But yeah, similar approach. Yeah.
I guess, would you be able to lock down your specific AI to only collect data on this date, and then once it ends that data collection, it's immutable, right? It doesn't change its logistical parameters or whatever. For production, is that kind of what you're saying?
I think so. I think that should be one of the questions in that it can be closed, and at that point it's immutable.
So this is the mind that I have, is I open the standard, and one of the things that the standard TNI standard requires, 14.4.13.3F, is the lab has to keep all information necessary for historical recorrection of data. So I guess for some of these things, like the medium risk, right? If you're using AI to count, I'll pick on Sam, I guess. If you're using AI to count colonies, or I'll pick on Peter, if you're using AI to count fish, right, that are moving around, and you're using that instead, I think there's an easier path there, because you have a before and an after, right? Of before the AI got used, here's the picture of my slide or whatever, and how AI counted all these fish, and you could obviously audit that with eyeballs, right? So that I see is less concerning. The more concerning one is, like, we're talking about integration, where it's like the integrator is like a math formula that says when it's this, then it does that, and then you can look at that. But if you're using an AI integrator, you don't know what it's picking as the starting point and the ending point. There's no like formula. You can't pull open the lid and look at what math is behind it, because it's just a network of nodes that you can't really see. So like, how do you audit that other than to have a picture before and after of, like, well, I looked at it and the peak is correct. Like, I don't really need to pick anything else. Like, you just look at it with your eyeballs. So, I guess it's more of that area of outside of the looking at it with your eyeballs, how can you control that environment? Because I don't really know how you would even start for that level of thinking. And is that an area where you're just like, no, don't use it at all if you can't look at it before and after?
I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that the risk is for sure like exactly that. Like if you're counting colonies or number of fish, yeah, pretty easy. You take a picture and say, yes, these are dead, these are alive. Easy enough to audit. The peak though, the peak integration, I think could be audited in the same way. I mean, like the math formula that the integrator uses, I don't know what it is. I'm sure we could get it, but I've never seen it, and it's not something we ever audit. But what I know is that it's always the same. That's where it's important that I know that that formula is hard coded to the software, that it doesn't change. I integrate a million peaks, the integration is always going to be the same. Like if I have a PFOS that splits with the linear and the branch, it's always going to miss that little branch, always, every time you do it manually, and that's part of the integrator, so you know that parameter is the same. The worry though is that if you have an AI-based model where you're not locking down, you're not sure if it's locked down, that'll change. You get model drift over, as it gets smarter. Like, yes, it gets better and it's for sure more useful and more helpful, but then you're going against what the TNI standard says of being able to recreate that data. Because if you use that same model on a sample set you analyzed 2 months ago or a year ago, it's going to be different. So I think that has to be important to lock it down and make sure that you're not training it anymore, and you're just using it for processing.
I think we have to kind of stop looking at it like and you're getting to this, that point that it's not a machine. And we almost have to look at it like an analyst. You can retain your records, but you're not necessarily going to retain the analyst 10 years down the line. So if we approach it and how do we test it the way that we test an analyst? If there's any way, and I don't have the answer to this, for it, to have that AI version of an IDOC, an AI version of ongoing, demonstrations of competency, some sort of ongoing periodic check as if it's an analyst. I think maybe the way to approach it, because it takes out, one, treating it like a machine, which is static, and two, expecting retention of something that we can't necessarily retain because it's fluid.
I like that suggestion. Yeah, go ahead.
Also, on another note, apart from data, I'm also thinking accuracy check is also very important while using AI because, say, for example, ELAP goes from a 2011 version to a 2016 version. And one of the features of AI, why it's being touted so much is efficiency and speed, right? So you feed both the methods, and this is something that some of the labs have suggested that they do is feed both the methods, feed the current SOPs, and update the method to the version that we need. But then we do need to manually check it for accuracy. Has anybody tried that?
Not yet, but yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's for sure going to be one of the principles of this, I think.
Another area that AI can actually benefit our work processes in the lab is all the training records, right? It's such a manual task right now. Maybe that's something where we can integrate.
And then that would be something that'd be like a tier 1, tier 2, minimal risk, right? The training record is still there. You have somebody that reviews it, but managing it, sorting it, setting timelines on expiration, all that stuff is like that. I mean, I think that's what, in my opinion, what AI is perfect for. It's the stuff that you could easily do with a person, but it would just take time and effort. But it's menial and it's the same every time. Perfect. The integrating of peaks, I'm a little more concerned with, but the simple stuff. There's a lot of application, I think, in laboratory space. Doing the MDL calculations and updates and all that stuff where it's easy to audit and easy to check. But I think that's why I think the model to John Franco's point that the model has to be or the assay the test that we do has to be generic enough to where it will pass something like that. Like maybe the model's not perfect. Maybe the model is not super good at doing integrations or whatever or something that touches data, but it's great at assigning DOC expiration dates or MDL verifications or whatever. So the model has to be generic, or the test has to be generic enough to capture both of those instances. And I agree with what John Franco said about making it future proof. So make it generic, make it so that we can implement this today, this year in 2026, but also in 2036 when we're living in the Skynet world, we could still use it and it still kind of makes sense. So yeah, I agree. There's a lot of options.
Okay, I'm taking notes too, and I like to summarize because that helps me. Maybe I'm AI, but one of the things that I'm seeing is we want a general use test that can capture any of the uses identified here. I like your tier list of risk. I think that's whether or not that's going to be the specific form, I don't know. But in terms of like when you could or could not use it, then what I liked a lot was some sort of demonstration of capability. Maybe have some sort of like how does if the AI is used for, let's say, data, right, for high risk, what's its DOC? How often does that get tested? Um, but that's for a closed loop system where the training period is opened and then ends, and then that's the model that gets used and gets recorded with like this is the version, and then you open it again, or you can build another model on the back end that does more training based on more data like you would with an MDL, but then you have a start and an end date for that new model that's incorporated all those things. So I'm seeing a lot of good ideas. How do you guys want to organize this? You want to build it as like, here's the test, and this is when it should be used and when it shouldn't be used? Do you want to build it like this is what we think we should requirement, like ELAP should add this as a standalone item, or do you want to reference TNI standard and say this is this requirement because of this thing, and this is this requirement because of that thing?
Yeah, I'd say yes to all those, but I mean, like a little bit of everything, right? I think it would be the test would be useful to have just the test, like straight up this question, yes or no, or a flowchart or something. But then having definitions and explanations and kind of a little bit of content. I don't want to pick on Peter or Sam, but you guys have anything that you'd need to add or feel like you need to add or want to see in something like this?
I don't think so. As you know, as kind of mentioned earlier, we've toyed around with the idea of starting to look at it, but a lot of ours would be photo-based, camera-based work. So there's always a permanent record to go back and QC check. I think, the integration into instruments and data processing is not as much a thing in the ecotox world. So a little less concern on that front. But no, I mean overall, I don't even want to know how long it took you to put this presentation together, but it was very well done.
Thanks. More time than I'd care to admit. But from
Yeah.
from your perspective of the visual, like the camera basis, I think it's very interesting because there's a lot of application where you can use computer vision to do a lot of stuff that an analyst or a user would do. What would you want to see for like validating something like that? It would just be before and after and have a human check, or what would you think is good for that?
Yeah, you'd have to do, I mean, is to the extent that we've talked about it, it would be sort of a random sampling QC check. So, I mean, we're looking at it in the context of some of the microscope work that we do. So, image is captured and um, the program reads it and scores it, and then a human checks every however many batches. The actual learning process, which you sort of alluded to earlier, of clients may have a little reticence to having the agent be taught on their data is one of the areas that is going to need a little more discussion. But for us, it would be some sort of a 5%, 10% manual QA check randomly on all of the reads that the program does.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's a good approach. Thank you.
And this could just be something that I missed for some reason in my head, but I do think that perhaps we should suggest, if you're going to the level 3 high risk, because I just know this because there's enough companies out there selling it to you. If a laboratory is going to that level where you're having all your integrations done by an AI, is that something where you should get that accredited or be audited directly before you're allowed to do it? Or that it's just a question I have, as far as I know that I today could call up somebody, drop a lot of money, and
Yeah.
in 6 months have all of my GCMS done. But I don't have to tell anyone right now. That's just where
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's kind of why I wanted to bring this up as something that would have, because yeah, I agree. I think the same people that are coming to your lab are coming here, coming to us, and yeah, they say, hey, just write us a check and we'll automate all this, and it's approved, whatever that means. So yeah, I feel like there should be some framework for, like, maybe not a full accreditation, because it takes time. Any lab is busy with stuff. So I don't want to burden them too much. But yeah, I think saying, yes, we're using this AI model. Here's my satisfactory passing test, right? If I have each method that uses this model or a model or something, we'll have a test, and then maybe lab should be required to send it to ask more questions or whatever. Yeah, I agree. I think there's risk in that. Yeah, I could go and do this today, and it'll be my secret and weird.
yeah, not a full on.
Yeah,
You're stuck in
yeah. Validated.
this.
Yeah. Yeah, if people are doing stuff with that data, I think end users should know that it would manipulate with AI and it was okay per the guidelines set by ELAC. Try to give you guys more work.
So this is more of a procedural question. Because we had this as a subcommittee item, which requires the noticing via Bagley Keene to meet. You want to still have it as the thing and as a subcommittee and pick one person to unfortunately shoulder the burden of putting it all together in a nice looking format, right? To then have further discussions, right? PowerPoints are great, but they're hard to like edit. You know what I mean? So is that the realm you want to go, or do you want to move this to a work group and have the full LTAC committee talk and discuss it that way?
I mean, I think the subgroup was good. I think the idea was good, but it's limited perspective. I mean, not limited perspective, but I think the more voices and the more better. That would be it. So if we make it a work group and do this, and I think we don't have to meet in person, right? We can do these and kind of really piece it together. But also, like, there are folks at a lot of our agencies and companies are like, I'm not an AI expert. I don't know anything about AI. I learned from Wikipedia and Google, so like I don't know. But like there are people that know more about this than I do that maybe would be valuable. So
Okay, we'll keep it as the subcommittee then, and we'll pick on a test. And I think this risk-based thing is a good incorporate into the test of like, if you're doing this activity, you must do of plus.
Yeah.
Right. You know, build on top of it. And then the last one, you'd need to have a DOC. Right. That'd be fun. Okay. I like that idea. We'll pick a time that works better.
Yeah.
Those have to be noticed 10 days in advance. So
10
if we
days,
want,
okay.
if we want to do a minimum, right, which requires a couple extra days for
Yeah.
me. So for the subcommittee meeting, let's figure out a time that works in July. Enough time, that way we can do the LTAC full vote on the 2 other agenda items.
That works, yeah.
Have a meeting in July for the subcommittee, which will be open to anyone, even a quorum of members can attend, but the quorum of members won't be able to do anything officially as LTAC, right? So, but that'll give more, hopefully, public engagement. We'll do talk specific on AI, but pick somebody on that subcommittee.
I already have I have some work done already. So yeah.
You have some stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good. I can do it.
July, we'll shoot for July for subcommittee meeting. Have James, Saguna, and Rachel as the other members. And then John Franco has shown interest in attending too. We'll add him as well. John Franco, you're going to be involved too.
Great, thank you.
Everybody gets to have the lovely pause while we figure out what time works.
If this is July, I'll be traveling the week of the 20th. But pretty much any other week.
Are we meeting as a group or is it just?
It's the subcommittee, so.
But the group is welcome since it's
Right, yes, everyone's welcome to attend, but the subcommittee members are the ones that are. How does the 8th sound? Laguna, is that good for you?
Do you mean July 8th?
Correct.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Let me check. Yes, the 8th will work.
Okay. You want it at 10? 10 seems to be a good starting.
This is virtual, right?
Virtual,
Yeah.
yes. Virtual only.
10 is
10 to
fine.
noon? Maybe 9:30. 9:30 to noon.
Oh, I have a conflict with 9:30. Sorry.
Nope. 10 it is.
Yeah, I think 10 would be good for me too.
Okay, I'll set that up. I'll send the notice either this week or next week, most likely next week. So I can get the recording for this meeting posted. Can add comments.
Yeah, I
You
think we just
you
can't vote or anything.
The full committee can't vote on this is what we wanted to do. So you guys are more than welcome to provide input. You just wouldn't be able. All right, I'm gonna look over to Annalyn for any public comments on this item. Didn't think we did. I hope we didn't lose too many attendees with the weird technical glitch. I know a couple folks reached out and were able to reconnect just fine. So to me, that sounds like good news that we didn't lose too many people. Then hearing anyone else have any more comments? More discussion? Anyone else want the subcommittee to do a specific thing? All right, hearing and seeing nothing, we can move on to the last topic. Last topic is for general public items not on the agenda. So this is open to any commenters that want to provide a comment. We have one that we're going to read out and we'll tee up. But first, I'm going to open up to the ELTAC members for any topic that we haven't discussed that you want ELTAC to focus on in the next session or something like that. Any general comments? Go ahead.
For this logo situation, is this something that the water board is going to design up for us? Should we have a community? I'll have my 1.5-year-old draw some of the crayon.
You can do that. Yeah, if you want to do that too. I don't know. So the logo, and I'll look over off the side of it. I know there's specific rules about like logos that you can and can't have. The water board's logo, I know we can't use from water board staff. So unfortunately, you guys won't be able to use that. We are trying to reach out to some graphics people to see if like what we can do. I'm less certain about the water board's policy on like how that works. But if we come up with like a logo, I think it'd be only fair for you all to vote on it. But if you guys want to come up with a logo and present and say, hey, I would really like everyone to come up with and use this on all the LTAC items, I think that'd be cool. I don't have an issue there. I don't know, I'm less certain about like policy things. If like, there's a few other things like I know I think the Water Quality Monitoring Council has their own logo.
A lot of folks have their own.
There's like a Santa Monica Bay, they have their own logo. That's so I don't know. I'm open to whatever you guys want. And provided it's acceptable within the water board's general water board's policy, I don't see a problem with you guys coming up with your own too.
And if you guys want to come up with one for July 8th.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that would be fitting, right? Yeah.
They come with a framework first.
Very funny.
Sure, yeah, if we have some ideas, yeah.
Yeah.
If not, we'll sue the water board.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll show it off with the next one. So if the documents don't have any comments, right? If they have any comments, we're coming back. If everyone doesn't vote unanimously on approving them with no changes, then we'll come back, right? It's only if they're unanimously approved, then we'll post them as is. Otherwise, the drafts will hang out on the website until the next meeting. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. If there's anything that anyone's like, no, wait, hold on, I want to talk about this, then we're bringing it back here, right? Yeah.
Chris, maybe an informational item on the future ELAP projects that you are being reassigned to, maybe the informal IT project, especially the database, if it's going to impact how we operate or how the labs are expected or how it could improve the processes. That would be a good one.
We'll hopefully have something very cool to share. I don't know.
Yeah. And, especially if those projects have any impacts on ELAP fees.
I don't no.
No?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. The GIS one's been underway for a while, and then the other
They're not going to reduce fees.
yeah, maybe it could. We're to make technological changes. ELAP's been working a long time to try to get our database updated. So
If it can automate our application, that would be good.
oh, I know. There's a lot of things in our wish list that we'd love to have. I don't know. I don't know the answer to those.
Do
But
you see LTAC or stakeholders from the lab community being partners in those efforts?
yeah, yes. And depending on what we're able to do with our folks at IT with the limited amount of resources that we have with them, right? If it's something I can ask the community about, I will. I'll probably send folks here targeted emails. I have a list of a lot of people that have provided really good feedback in the past. I'm going to lean on them again if I can, because it is super helpful to get something. We might have like an informal work group where we did for the fee restructuring effort that we try to do, right? Where we're reaching out to a whole bunch of laboratories that we know will provide us with valuable feedback because you do provide us with a lot of valuable feedback that we really appreciate and use. So anything that I can, if I can, I will.
Perfect. And the lab really appreciated you forwarding the FOA changes.
Yes.
So we
I know.
thank you for that.
There's a few of them that we're still fixing. There's we got some good feedback on that of like, hey, this one's not quite right. This one needs to be changed. And then the timeline that everyone gave. If I can, I'll come back with an info item. Probably I'll have something. It may just be the GIS map, because that one's more underway than. I know in the last meeting, one of the items we had was potentially a location change topic.
Or we could alternate other than SAP.
Yes. Oh, so we might be able to do the next LTAC meeting somewhere else. So we'll see scheduling wise how that works out. I'll leave that to the new Delapo to help coordinate that too. Ideally love to be able to alternate back and forth. The bylaws put everything in Sacramento unless otherwise specified ahead of time, and this would be a reason, right? Specify it ahead of time, but it's more than
Previously, you did a public
Two.
location in the south too. Is that still an option?
It's much more difficult to have two physical locations under the new rules than to have one physical location and then everyone can join via Zoom or be webcast, right? That's easier than having the two locations. Just because we have to have a quorum of members at the main location, whatever that notice location is. So that makes it easier if we're having it in one spot, right? To have everyone. Otherwise, we got to announce both locations and hopefully less of a drive or flight. You're kind of like middle. So we'll see what we can do for the next one. All right. Any other topics that you guys want? I'm leaving it open for more public comments. If anyone has a comment that they want to discuss, please email elapca_comments at waterboards. But we do have one.
Before you go to that public comment, Chris, presentation, you had a lot of information. I think I got some of it, but perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and same with Matthews with all those links and stuff. I'll send. You want me to just send the one you sent me? Okay. Yes, and I have that as well. So I'll send everyone the presentations afterwards.
I think the one thing that I would like to, from your presentation, are the timelines were not on the thing. I don't know if that's something, even an approximate timeline would be helpful.
So the one comment we got is from Duncan Millar, he's the Global Business Director at IAS. We have been working with all of our third-party assessment agencies. That was mentioned in the DELAPO report to update the memorandum of understanding between us and all of the agencies. In addition to that, we've instituted a couple new forms. So some of the things you'll see, hopefully, and I'm less familiar with this, so you'll have to forgive me. But ahead of your TPA coming to your laboratory, they'll send you a form that's basically saying, I haven't been a consultant for you guys in the past, right? And I won't consult in the future moving forward, right? So that's what we've been doing with our TPAs. So it's not really relevant to the rest of the conversations we've had, which is why it's on item number 8, right? Public comment's not on the agenda. So IAS believes that the EPA Drinking Water Laboratory Certification Officer Training course, which is offered by EPA, should be offered more frequently and made more geographically accessible. Limited availability of significant constraints NGAB's ability to develop and expand a qualified pool of credentials assessors. As the demand for ELAP and the drinking water laboratory assessments grow, the current schedule and regional access limitations create delays in assessor qualification and workforce development. Expanding the frequency and geographic distribution of EPA training opportunities would strengthen assessor capacity, improve responsiveness, and better support the ELAP laboratory community. Regarding consulting activities and potential conflicts of interest for assessors, IAS is actively working with ELAP and the EPA to explore whether the current policy framework can be addressed in a practical and balanced manner. Given the ongoing shortage of EPA certified assessors, some flexibility or interim adjustment of the conflict of interest guidelines may be necessary until the supply of qualified assessors is sufficient to meet program demand and support the ELAP laboratory community. Thank you, Duncan, for the comment. Provided, unfortunately, he wasn't able to connect with us to provide it in person. I'll open it to the committee members to go ahead and discuss, but then you're free to redirect questions back to me if you'd like.
Okay, any sort of consulting banding on that? Would a gap assessment be considered consulting? Would training be
yes.
considered consulting?
Yeah, so consulting is them getting paid by your laboratory to do non-assessment activities. So if
That also, in a broader context, assessors are not really employees of IAS, right? Like, for example, if we take IAS, so if my contract to assess would be through IAS, but my contract to consulting would be individual assessor. How would you, on paper, I never paid
it's still
IAS to do the consulting.
Yeah, it's still that same prohibition. So all of the, and that's part of the like T&I standard that all of them are held to, right? So if they're doing work that's paid by that laboratory, regardless of whether it's from them or from that company or from a different company, right? I know A2LA has two separate arms. They have A2LA, the assessment agency, and A2LA workplace training. They're both A2LA. So the assessors that work for workplace training don't do the assessments that the assessors are doing for those laboratories, even if they're doing things for both activities, right? So it's the same kind of thing of if you're an assessor for that laboratory and you've done consulting for that laboratory, however that form took place, right? That's the part that's prohibited by T&I, ISO, that kind of thing.
Ever, or is it a 2-year, 5-year, 10 years?
I don't recall what the standard requires, but we want to know any of those activities.
Because he's right, we're already struggling to get assessment.
I have a note that says
consulting,
we're not feeling a strain right now in terms of like
because
the number of assessors that we have. It might be specific to that specific agency, how many assessors that they're using. But we have a lot. He is correct, though, in that the pool of assessors, especially for drinking water, is limited by EPA. So EPA is the one that holds the training and requirements, and there's a test that you have to pass in order to be a laboratory certification officer for drinking water assessments. And that's for specific fields. So one for micro, one for organic, and one for inorganic chemistry. And then cryptosporidium is sprinkled in there like dust, and same with radiochemistry. It's not super clear on how those work. But that's all at US EPA's requirement, right? So that in order for us as a state to offer primacy and do drinking water assessments, we have to have staff that have passed that. And same if it's it doesn't matter if it's employed by us or if it's a TPA, they have to meet that same level of requirement. You have to go to Cincinnati and you have to take it in person and you have to pass. And all of those things are time consuming and difficult to get done.
But not just anybody can do that, right?
Right.
Go to Cincinnati and take that
Right.
class. That has to be
It
like
has to be
approved.
sponsored by a state, so us
Ah.
often, and then it has to be approved by EPA. And EPA limits how many people go. So it's not something we have control over at all.
Because how good would everybody's labs be if so many people got to go and take that class? Plus, it opens up the door to so many other qualified people if somebody were to one day decide to go down that road, you know.
Right. Yeah. I like their class. It's really good. It is very hard to pass, though. It's all of the EPA drinking water rules in the span of a week. So
If you want to assess wastewater labs, you don't need that certification.
wastewater is not a requirement. Yeah. But they do have to be similarly qualified, right? They can't just send somebody off the street to go do your assessments, right? You have to have experience. You have to have done shadowed assessments beforehand. Got a bunch of stuff listed out there.
So is that MOU changes already in works, or is it?
So there's been
has it
one
al-
update, and then we're going to do another update too to help clarify some of the language that we've added. Functionally, the only impact you're really going to see is that form. So that conflict of interest form.
They have, and is it going to be on the labs to?
It's both, right? It's both the lab and the assessor. Both of you have to say, yes, this person hasn't done consulting work for us.
And it's going to be the assessor, right? So like if I get assessment from company X, and I have assessor Alice come in, but I get consulted by Bob, who's also employed, or
Company X.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because that's very restrictive.
Yeah, because then it's different
then-
people. I think, like, I understand the conflict of interest. I think it's for sure a conflict of interest. You can't have the Alice auditing, but also telling you how to set up your lab.
Right.
It
Yeah,
seems like
no,
conflict of interest. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
But if it's, Alice is employed by company X to do the assessment, but Bob goes in to consult, and there are independent contractors of company X, if that's okay, maybe that would alleviate.
Yeah, but a permanent ban on the person providing consulting work to perform an assessment would limit our assessors. Maybe put some sort of a timeline on it. 1 accreditation cycle, 2, whatever that is. But I think it would help redefining that ban.
And all of the assessors that I've talked to have their own internal, I'm not going to do any work for this lab.
They're assessors, right?
Right.
You're assuming them to be just as ethical.
Peter, go ahead. I know you've been very patient with your hand up. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So, I mean, my question was sort of along the lines of Augustine's for a clarification of it. It's a person and not a company, because I think that's going to be hugely restrictive. And then I think my sort of follow-on input into that was, as California continues to move towards being a TNI accreditation state, and if the sort of rule remains that you'll be forced to get accreditation from California if you have a lab in California as your primary accreditor, it's going to force the use of more TPAs for a lot of the labs that are getting accredited through TNI through other states. And so it's just one more pressure point, I guess, on the number of available assessors that are out there. Speaking, of course, from somebody who runs a specialty group, of which there's already a pretty small pool to come from. So again, as long as, I agree with Shush that a limitation on it time-wise wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, and a clear clarification that it is a person and not a company that is that restriction.
Yes, it's a person, not a company, and the push is coming from US EPA. So the EPA, as our oversight body, pushes some of these rules onto us, and it's coming from them. We can discuss it a little bit more if you want, but coming from them, I I unfortunately don't know everything that ELEP is doing as much as I try. Uh, it's coming from EPA. It's for the person, not the company. And that push is really from their oversight requirements. So for us to maintain primacy, we do have to listen to what EPA says because that's where the fundamental rule comes from for drinking water specifically. For wastewater, it's a little bit less flexible. And to Peter, to your point for the T&I state assessor item, I know that's still a topic that we haven't resolved internally as we are looking towards how we're going to be able to offer full T&I accreditation as a voluntary option in the future. We had so many good comments from the February listening session that have generated, I know, way more work for other folks that are not me, thankfully. But they're all questions that I think are very valid that we want to have addressed before we offer T&I, full T&I accreditation, just so we have that more clarity in terms of who can do your assessment, right?
Yeah, totally fair enough. That's why I use the word if.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm getting a note for dates. Yes, there's a stakeholder meeting this Thursday about the full T&I program that went out as an announcement. All right, I'm looking, Annalyn, last call for. Okay. Anything else? Seeing a bunch of shaking heads. I'll look online at Sam and Peter. Bunch of shaking heads. All right. Well, I think that will wrap up the committee. We don't usually vote to adjourn, but if you guys want to vote to adjourn, we can do that, or we can just say thanks, everyone. I see a vote to adjourn from Shushmita and a second from James. So, uh, and I see a bunch of thumbs up here. We won't do that one as a roll call vote. I think we're all good with that. So for that, the next ELTAC meeting, full meeting, will be sometime in November. We'll send that date and schedule and where it's going to be. Maybe we'll be able to move it down south. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. And that'll be.
Move it south. I'll offer a tour of our lab.
Ooh, okay. So
close to our lab. I'll offer a tour of our lab. Yeah,
so maybe we'll push hard to move it down south. I don't know specifically. I know we tried to put it the second week, but there's also Veterans Day that's always around there, so it's always a logistical nightmare. But ooh, okay, all right. Well,
it's a nice facility too.
We have two options then. Well, we'll push to have it down in Southern California next time. A little bit of change of location, and then we'll have a. I've already forgotten what day it is. This is
July 8th.
July 8th for the subcommittee meeting. And then we'll have an announcement go out. I'm taking vacation at the beginning of June. So when I get back after my vacation in June, send an ask to all the members, hey, does anyone have any comments on these two items? Or are we okay for a vote, as we discussed here, to publish them and finalize them? So with that, I think I've covered everything. Heads nod. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Lovely to see everyone, and we'll see you all the variety of other things that are going to be happening in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.